Hello to all my dear followers. Welcome to the 8th and final chapter of What If Naruto Mastered the Forgotten Art of Sealing. I just ask that you leave your like and comment, and if you haven't seen the previous chapters, you'll have them in a playlist on the channel. Without further ado, enjoy.
Pain arrived to find Naruto sitting on a rock, looking up at the sky holding Jiraiya's headband. This should be far enough, Naruto said as he stood up testing Jiraiya's headband on his belt. Now about Konan. Naruto bit his thumb as he performed a series of hand signs. Kuchios no Jutsu. Naruto was hidden in a thick layer of smoke, but a sudden burst of chakra sent the smoke flying. Naruto was standing on top of Gamabunta's head while Gamaken and Gamahiro stood on either side. I think this should just be between you and me, Pain. Gamabunta looked over at Naruto and saw Jiraiya's headband on his waist. Sorry about Jiraiya, kid. Naruto nodded as he moved away from Gamabunta's head. Konan, stay out of this, go and take care of me. Naruto was confused by this, but smiled when he realized what happened. What's so funny about it? I knew there was something off about you six. Naruto chuckled and shook his head. I realized you six aren't alive. Pain's eyes widened at that as Naruto continued. Those black rods are probably used to control bodies almost like puppets. Very well, Kyuubi. You certainly are very clever. Pain watched as the three toads removed their weapons. I suppose we should begin the battle between a god and a mere demon. Naruto only took a fighting stance as the animal path slammed its hands against the ground. Naruto watched as a giant dog, a bull, and a rhinoceros appeared in front of Naruto. I'll handle the summons, Gamabunta announced as he drew his dagger. You handle Pain. Naruto nodded and removed his shirt to reveal a completely covered body of seals. I'm about to bring this god to his knees. Naruto roared as he charged while his seals began to glow. Naruto charged straight at Pain with deadly intent reflected in his blue eyes. Naruto kept charging even as the Preda jumped in front of him. Naruto lunged and grabbed the path around his waist, throwing him to the ground with a smirk on his face. Deva continued to watch in confusion until he heard the ground begin to crack beneath him. He looked down just as Naruto emerged from the ground with a Rasengan in his hand and threw the spiraling ball at his face. But before it connected, Naruto was destroyed by Deva's Shinra Tensei. Naruto was sent backward just as the Preda path destroyed the Kagebunshin and grabbed Naruto by the leg. It's useless if you can't win. Deva watched as Naruto smiled at her once more. It's never useless, Naruto announced as he vanished in a puff of smoke. Another Kagebunshin. Deva looked around just as Naruto appeared behind the animal path. The path turned around to defend itself, but Naruto simply slashed its arm with a kunai, drawing blood. What's he doing too? Pain decided not to wait and find out, as he had the Azura path grab Naruto and throw him into a nearby rock formation, but not before Naruto touched the animal path in the chest. Blood trickled down Naruto's mouth as he continued to smile. Kyaku Fuin, contract seal, Naruto said simply as a seal appeared in the animal path. The three animal summons suddenly stopped in their tracks as they vanished into smoke. Naruto watched as the Preda path leaped towards him with its arms stretched forward. Naruto extended his right arm as he began to form his Rasengan. Futon. Rasengan. Naruto moved his arm towards the Preda path. He didn't learn anything from our dash. Pain stopped when he realized the spinning orb wasn't being absorbed. Damn! The Deva path reached out with his palm and pulled the Preda out of danger, making Naruto smile. What did you do? Naruto smiled even bigger as he gestured to his seal-covered body. The moment that body touched my clone, a seal was transferred to its body. Naruto held up a tiger seal and a seal appeared on the Preda path's face and arms. It is designed to negate any type of seal as long as I have the chakra to keep it in check. Now, for your animal path, I placed a seal to stop your pesky summoning. In short, I have deactivated two of you puppets who can only serve now as little more than shields. Deva just stared at the two paths in question when they suddenly went slack and fell to the ground. If that's the case, then I don't need to waste chakra keeping them moving. The Deva path looked at the human path who quickly sealed the bodies in a scroll as he too went limp. The Naraku path walked over and sealed the human path in the scroll as well. The more chakra I concentrate on the necessary bodies, the more damage I can do. Naruto simply stood up and got into a fighting stance. Just like that, Deva flicked his finger at Naruto, who dodged just in time as the boulder behind him was obliterated. But don't worry, it'll only break your bones. I thought if I got rid of the bodies, it would lessen their power. Naruto thought as sweat ran down his head. But I was wrong. Naruto looked at Gamabunta and the others just as they jumped into the air and until they were right above the Deva path. Get out of there! Gamabunta looked at Naruto just as the Deva path raised his hand to the sky. Shinra Tensei, Gamabunta, Gamahiro, and Gamaken were blasted out of the Deva's path and sent into the sky. Naruto quickly clasped his hands and saw 3 distinct bursts of smoke. It won't matter if I save them. They'll all bow to God. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he charged at the Deva with a Rasengan in hand. Triple X, Kabuto, Haku, and Naruto were all sitting on top of Kage listening to the plans going on. We have to take care of Akatsuki here and now, he growled as he looked around. We need to work together, or they'll pick us off one by one. This is coming from the one who always tried to get his hands on the Hyuga's Byakugan twice. Tsunade looked at who just looked back. Then why should Konoha or Uzushio follow you? Tsunade turned to look at Naruto, but he seemed to be sleeping with his head back. Gufukage, are you even worried about the Akatsuki threat? Mifune glared at Naruto, who ignored the samurai general. He stood up to face Naruto, but a sudden burst of smoke appeared next to him. Got it, came Yukaken's voice, gently placing Karabi back against the wall. But Naruto decided to stay behind and handle that pain. The Naruto in the chair looked at Yukaken. So I can stop pretending to be him. Kabuto nodded and Naruto's form began to shift and move like water until a boy with white hair that had a blue tint along with purple eyes appeared. I did exactly what you wanted. Kabuto now has as a reward. Of course, Suigetsu. Kabuto pulled a scroll from his cloak. The swords of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Shishinin Shu, 7 ninja swordsmen of the hidden mist. Suigetsu grabbed the scroll and quickly stood up, approaching Mei with a wicked smile. Mizukage. Suigetsu gave a slight nod. Suigetsu Hozuki. Mei looked intently at Suigetsu, who gently handed her the scroll. I've retrieved our sacred swords, Suigetsu announced as Mei gently took the scroll from him, but he noticed the small grimace on Suigetsu's features. I'm sorry, I wanted to return sooner, but I was delayed. Mei opened the scroll and smiled at the familiar names. Your brother would be proud of you, Suigetsu. Mei looked at Suigetsu, who nodded, a rare sadness in his eyes. Mangetsu was an excellent swordsman, but perhaps you could be better than him. Suigetsu looked up as Mei handed the scroll back to him. Can I trust you to watch over these swords? Suigetsu? Yes, Mizukage. Suigetsu smiled as he took the scroll and held it like it was a precious gem. Inoki watched the scene with a frown. You pretended to be a Kage. It was Naruto's idea. Yukaken looked at the Kages in question. He went to retrieve Karabi, but he arrived too late to stop the sealing. Yukaken watched as he approached his brother. But don't worry, thanks to Naruto, he'll live. Yukaken turned around just as Tsunade approached him. Where is Naruto now? Yukaken could hear the concern and anger in his voice, but he kept his smile in place. He's fighting pain right now. Tsunade's eyes widened as she turned on her heel and started to leave, but a wall of swords appeared in front of her. He instructed me to ensure the meeting went as planned. Yukaken pulled his sword from the ground. I'll make sure the outcome reaches Naruto, but this meeting must continue. Tsunade looked at Yukaken, who simply twirled his dagger in his fingers. Now let's get to the point. Triple X. Naruto stood over the Azura Path's destroyed body with a Rasengan still spinning in his hand. Next, Naruto said as the Deva Path raised its hand towards him. Bansho Tenin, heavenly attraction of all creation. Naruto suddenly lurched forward as a black blade appeared from the Deva's sleeve. Naruto released his Rasengan and brought his hands forward in a tiger seal. The blade collided with a spinning barrier, sending Naruto tumbling to the ground. I learned a few new tricks. Naruto smiled at the Deva. FUINJUTSU, Kamikaze, Divine Wind. The Deva looked at his sword just as the barrier began to spin faster, making a deafening grinding sound. The Deva jumped back just as the barrier ripped his sword to pieces until nothing remained. And now it's time for the finishing move. Naruto crossed his fingers and created 3 clones. Naruto and the clones held out their hands as a spinning mass began to form. Futon, Raisin Shuriken. The 3 Narutos held out their respective Raisin Shurikens as they ran in different directions. It's too late. Deva raised his right arm, preparing to deflect Naruto's jutsu. I can still win. A clone leaped into the air and threw his Raisin Shuriken at Deva. Deva ducked under the buzzsaw, but thanks to the link they shared, he saw the disc heading straight for Naruto's path. Pain had Naruto's path jump to the side to avoid the disc, but that was when the jutsu expanded and took Naruto's path. Deva's path narrowed his eyes as he looked at the last remaining jutsu. Take this! Naruto and the clone launched their Raisin Shuriken at the same time, but Deva's path simply deflected the 2 jutsu. That was the point Dashta. It was then that he heard the familiar hum of a Rasengan forming. He looked up and saw the clone holding the jutsu towards him, but before he got within an inch, he was destroyed by the Azura. I thought I got rid of that thing. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the Azura, but he eventually jerked and fell to the ground once more. I guess he survived long enough to save the last pain. Naruto turned his attention back to Deva path as he stood up fully. I never thought it would be so troublesome. Naruto could hear the faint tone of anger in her voice. But I guess I should have expected that I would lose some of my bodies today, but I never thought you would do it this way. First you develop a Kyaku Fuin to stop my animal path, then you negate the seal on my Preta path, and then you destroyed my Azura and Naruto paths. Yeah. The only one I didn't get on purpose was that path you sealed in the scroll along with the animal and Preta. Naruto smiled, but stopped when the Deva looked at him. This ends here. The Deva clasped his hands together, and once he separated them, a small black sphere appeared between his palms. Chibaku Tensei, heavenly body erupting from the earth. Naruto pulled on Kyuubi's chakra as he prepared for Pain's jutsu. That's all. Naruto focused his chakra into spinning in his palm. Whoever uses the jutsu will decide the victor. Pain watched as Naruto's chakra began to form, but it wasn't a spinning blue ball. This time it was black and motionless, but Nagato could feel the power pouring out of it through the Deva path. Biju Rasengan, tailed beast spiral sphere. Naruto looked at the Deva path as a gust of wind blew dust between the 2. XXX. Madara crossed the door leading to a crypt as he made his way down the stairs into the darkness until he entered the inner sanctum of the crypt. He looked at the coffins around him until he found the one he was looking for. He grabbed the handles and pulled it to the ground with the Hokage symbol on its surface. Madara broke the lid of the coffin and looked down to see the body of Minato Namikaze. Hello, Minato. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Madara's only Sharingan glowed in the dim light. Devapath launched the small orb into the air until it stopped in mid-flight. Naruto watched as the pebbles began to float toward the orb, but not a second later they began to tear off chunks of the ground. Damn! Naruto grunted as he felt himself being pulled, but was saved by the dense ball in his hand. It's almost like a giant vacuum cleaner. The piece of ground Naruto was standing on began to crack until it rose up toward the orb. Guess I'll have to improvise. Naruto crashed into the rocky surface in the sky as more boulders piled up on top of him until he was no longer visible. It's over, Pain said as he walked away. Whatever that jutsu is, it's pointless. He began to walk away with the earth orb slowly following him, but that was when the ground began to shake. What? Pain looked down at the orb and saw it shaking uncontrollably until it exploded, sending out a shockwave that pushed Devapath into a rock with enough force to make an indentation. Pain looked up to see the Chibaku Tensei split in half with Naruto looking down at him with a smirk. He destroyed it. Naruto jumped off the earth ball just as it began to crumble, but the moment Naruto touched the ground it disappeared in a flash of light. Naruto reappeared in front of the Devapath with a deadpan look in his eyes. You lose. Naruto slammed his right hand into the Devapath's midsection, obliterating the rock just behind him. Naruto pulled his fist out of the path's stomach and watched as it fell to the ground. We finished this. Naruto looked back at Amigakure as he picked up the Deva Path's body and disappeared in a flash of light. XXX. Madara had just emerged from the crypt when Zetsu appeared beside him. Naruto is fighting Nagato in Amigakure. Madara simply shrugged at that information. I have faith that Nagato will defeat Naruto. Madara looked at Zetsu, who seemed nervous. Is there anything else? Yes. He managed to bring the Hachibi Jinchuriki back to life after the sealing. Madara's single eye widened. You know what that means, Madara? Yes. It seems Naruto has finally managed to control his half of the Kyuubi's chakra. Madara chuckled at this. Perhaps we should go watch the final showdown between Naruto and Nagato. Zetsu nodded as he disappeared underground while Madara disappeared into his vortex. XXX. Naruto reappeared in the center of Amigakure, causing the civilians to jump back. She's here somewhere. Naruto closed his eyes for a second until he slowly opened them, looking towards the lone tower in the distance. There it is. Naruto disappeared once again, leaving scared people behind. Naruto appeared in front of a giant metal gate only to see Konan standing in front of him. Out of my way, Naruto said with no emotion in his orange eyes. I'm afraid I can't do that. Konan began to peel like paper as wings appeared on her back. I don't want to fight you. Naruto kept his eyes locked on hers as a torrent of paper surrounded both her and Naruto. But if you continue, I'll have no choice but to hit you. Konan's response was to create a spear made of paper as she prepared to fight Naruto. Naruto sighed as he placed Yahiko's body on his back. It's fine if you want to fight. Konan disappeared in a flurry of paper as the paper covered Naruto's vision. Konan threw her spear at Naruto's back only for Naruto to catch it. Try again. Naruto threw Yahiko's body into the air as he went to punch Konan. But that's when Naruto saw the tags. Explosive tags. Naruto and Konan were consumed in a giant explosion that shook the tower and sent Naruto back into the wall. I'm willing to die for Nagato, Konan announced as the dust cleared, revealing his paper body ripped in half. That's the extent of my faith in him. I don't have time for this. Naruto grunted as he stood up, feeling his chakra level slowly drop. I'll end this in one move. Naruto disappeared in a flash of light as he reappeared behind Konan as more paper bombs surrounded the two. Stop! Konan immediately flew back, avoiding Naruto's blow that created a crater. I was wondering when you and I would meet face to face. Naruto looked up to see the giant metal doors open, revealing an emaciated man in a metal wheelchair. I'm Nagato. Naruto glared at him as he released the Kyuubi's chakra to stop the drain of his own. So you're the one who killed Jiraiya-sensei. Naruto watched as Nagato smiled at that. Yes, I killed Jiraiya-sensei. This brought a confused look to Naruto's face. You never knew, but Konan and I were both Jiraiya students. Naruto's eyes widened at that as he began to tremble. Does it make you mad to know that a former student killed Jiraiya? Why? Naruto looked at Konan and Nagato in confusion. If you were their students, why would you want war? War. Nagato tilted her head slightly. But we don't want war, we want peace. Naruto's confused look and angry eyes prompted Nagato to continue. We want to capture the bijou to create a weapon capable of destroying an entire village in seconds. How is that peace? Naruto shouted. Doing something like that will only make more war. No, it won't. Nagato said with a frown. People will find out about this weapon and demand its use against a rival village. After seeing what you did, causing so much pain and suffering, they will begin to fear war and peace. That's wrong, Naruto said, not believing what he heard from Nagato. Killing hundreds of people to create peace isn't true peace. What will happen to those who survived the explosion? They'll allow hatred to guide them against the village that destroyed theirs, and a war will break out. The peace you're talking about is only temporary. It won't last forever, and when it's over, they'll ask for the use of the weapon again. Nagato smiled at that as Naruto realized what he was doing. I knew this peace would only be temporary, but every time that peace ends, a new one begins after the weapon is used. Naruto looked at the ground as it began to shake even more. There is no true peace, but with your death, I will bring peace to this war-torn land. Suddenly, a black spike shot out of Nagato's wheelchair and impaled Naruto through the stomach. From this distance, I can control your entire body. Nagato stopped talking as a flash of narrowed red eyes behind a locked cage door appeared above his head. Clever boy, Nagato declared as he began to shake from the chakra coming from Naruto. Naruto jerked his head up, revealing narrowed red eyes as he ripped the chakra receiver from his stomach. You're not a student of Jiraiya, Naruto snarled. No student of his would walk this kind of path. You're nothing but a tyrant if that's your kind of peace. Naruto yelled, this causing Nagato to narrow her eyes at Naruto in confusion and hatred. You know nothing, boy, Nagato stated as he leaned back in his chair. We've suffered pain you couldn't even dream of. I watched my parents die in front of my eyes. I killed my best friend. And everything I held dear died around me. Naruto's eyes returned to normal as he began to calm down. You know nothing of the true world. The peace Jiraiya spoke of is nothing but a lie. People will never understand each other. It's impossible for them to always fight. Nagato glared at Naruto as his eyes glowed in the darkness. Even now you hate me, you want to kill me. Don't deny it. I can see everything with these eyes. Naruto looked Nagato straight in the eyes. Well, what will you do? Will you kill me and let this world destroy itself? Or will you surrender? Naruto looked up at the sky with a small smile on his face as he tightened his grip on Jiraiya's headband. I can't forgive what you did. Nagato sighed as Konan prepared to fight. But I can't give up either. Jiraiya-sensei believed there would come a time when people would understand one another, and as a former student, I must follow the same path he gave me. That way I won't kill you, Nagato. If I did kill you, I would be an instrument of your own village's wrath. Naruto gestured to the village behind him with a solemn expression. How can you believe that? Nagato shouted as she looked at Naruto, who smiled back. That peace is nothing but dash. Then I will find peace. Nagato stopped and looked at Naruto with a different look in her eyes. I know the road will be difficult, but I can't give up even if I have to create peace out of nothing. Naruto then pointed his thumb at himself with a giant grin on his face. I swear this on my village, name and clan. I will make sure there is peace because I am Naruto Uzumaki of the Uzumaki clan. Nagato's eyes widened at Naruto's statement as she looked at him. Uzumaki, Nagato muttered, causing Naruto and Konan to look at him in concern. My mother used to tell me how she was from a clan that was destroyed during one of the wars. She'd tell me all about them and how they were feared for their FUINJUTSU. Naruto looked at Nagato, his confusion growing. Dark red hair and an expert in FUINJUTSU, Naruto said in a surprised voice. Those are signs of an Uzumaki. All those seals we found and that seal on the Pretapath were high-level things that even the seal master would have trouble making. You're an Uzumaki, aren't you? Before Nagato could speak, another voice spoke up. What are you doing, Nagato? Madara's voice sounded as he appeared beside him. Finish him off, and we can go create a world of peace. Nagato didn't move or speak as Madara looked between him and Naruto. You didn't tell me. Madara's eyes widened as a strong force pushed him against a wall. That he was part of my family. Madara glared at Nagato as his chair slowly turned toward him. Guess I should have known better than to think you'd kill him if you knew who he was. Madara slowly emerged from the rubble, his Sharingan transforming into his eternal Mangekyo. Troublesome Uzumaki. No matter how small the blood relationship, you always have to team up. Konan, take care of Naruto, Nagato ordered as her chair opened and left Nagato on his knees. I have nothing left to give you, Naruto, except this. You are the bringer of peace. I believe in you, Naruto. Konan went to help Nagato, but Nagato motioned for her to step down. Thank you for all your help, Konan. Please help Naruto. You can no longer help me in this endeavor. Yes, we can, Naruto shouted. We can end Dashda. I can never forgive myself for being used by this man. Then, to everyone's surprise, with what little strength Nagato had, he stood on two shaky legs. But I can make sure to give you enough time to get out of here. I'm not going anywhere, Dashda. Naruto stopped when Nagato raised her hand, palm facing him. Goodbye, Naruto. Naruto was suddenly knocked off the tower by Nagato and sent straight back to his village. Conan, I'm asking you to help Naruto defeat Madara. I'd also like you to get Yahiko's body out of here. Conan nodded, but tears threatened to fall as she wrapped Yahiko's body in paper. Goodbye, Nagato. With that, Conan vanished in a swirl of paper, leaving behind a smiling Madara and an angry Nagato. I'm afraid your sacrifice is in vain. Madara walked slowly forward as Nagato tried to maintain her balance. I'll teleport to Naruto's location and then dash. It was then that Madara felt the pressure begin to increase until he could no longer move. I know I might not be able to kill you. Nagato's eyes flashed with power as he began to increase the gravity in the area. But at least I can slow them down. Madara's eyes widened as he saw a black orb appear above them. Chibaku Tensei, Sayatsu, heavenly body bursting from the pressure of the earth. The orb suddenly expanded until it reached the edge of Nagato's village. Suddenly, black energy shot downwards, causing the entire area to shake from the impact of the attack. Nagato felt herself floating in darkness as she gently closed her eyes. Naruto, I wonder what would have been if we had met under different circumstances. Nagato smiled as she felt her life coming to an end. Perhaps we could have changed the world together. The black beam vanished, leaving a hole in the ground. XXX. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself surrounded by Amigakure ninja forces. What have you done to Pain-sama? A ninja asked, holding a kunai at the ready. Stop! Everyone turned toward the source of the voice. Nagato sacrificed his life to save this boy. The ninja turned as Naruto stood up and looked at Conan with an almost depressed look in his eyes. Naruto, you shouldn't be sad about Nagato's death. He believed that you would be the one to change the world for the better. Conan held out her hand as she created a bouquet of paper flowers. And we will honor Nagato's final wish and help you. The AIM ninja bowed their heads with sad eyes filled with tears at Nagato's death. Thank you, Conan. Naruto gently took the flowers and looked toward the setting sun. Now let's end this crusade. XXX. Madara teleported back to his hiding place, arms wrapped around his stomach as he coughed. So I guess Nagato betrayed us. Zetsu stated as Madara looked at him. Yes. Then Madara began to spin his vortex as he dropped Nagato and Minato's bodies. But even the dead can have a purpose. Zetsu smiled, licking his lips as Madara bent down, picked up the bodies and left. Sasuke kept his eyes on Madara as he watched him walk towards a nearby door. Sasuke, I have an important mission for you. Sasuke only grunted as he looked away. I want you to lead Zetsu to attack Konohagakure. This cheered Sasuke's enthusiasm as he looked at Madara. But the moment the other hidden villages are trying to help Konoha, I want you to find Naruto and bring him to me. Madara then disappeared behind the door as Sasuke smiled. Revenge will soon be mine, Sasuke announced as he walked out with the plant man following him. XXX. Day after, Naruto looked out the window to see the people of Uchiha preparing for the coming war. Are you sure we can trust her? Uchiha asked from behind Naruto, who smiled. Yes, I'm sure. Naruto turned around as Tensa entered. How are your forges? Tensa smiled as she patted her head, allowing the soot to fall. Fully operational. Tensa then took out a scroll and passed it to Naruto. This just arrived for you, Gafukage-sama. Tensa gave the scroll to Naruto, who gladly accepted it with a smile, which Tensa returned as she left. Naruto looked at the scroll for a few more seconds before placing it on his desk. I want to know something, Uchiha. Uchiha waited for Naruto's question with a knowing smile. Did you know there were other Uzumaki survivors? Your grandfather suspected that some of the Uzushio may have survived and dispersed into different regions. Uchiha sighed as he sat down. But we might never find any if we knew who that Nagato boy was. We would have helped him. I'm sorry you've lost another member of your family, Naruto. But right now we can't lose our focus. We must be steadfast in the coming war. Naruto nodded as he sat down with a smile. But that quickly faded when he looked at Uchiha. We have to keep a close eye on him, Naruto said with a definite tone in his voice. I understand they'll be keeping an eye on him. Uchiha gave a quick bow, but before leaving, he gave Naruto one last piece of information. Kumo and Konoha are going to have a problem with each other. And you know it, Naruto. Naruto nodded as he looked at Uchiha-ken. I know, but we all have to work together. Uchiha-ken nodded and left as Naruto looked out the window as a single falcon flew through the air. What are you up to? Naruto thought as he looked at the scroll on his desk. XXX. Kabuto hummed a happy tune as he walked down the hallway that was filled with bodies. I wonder if he survived my little test? Kabuto smiled at that as he walked into a wide room that was covered in blood. He looked at the creature in the middle of the room as it slowly reverted back into a human. Well, you did quite well, Yugo. Yugo walked into the light with a blank look in his eyes as he looked at Kabuto. Naruto thinks he has me on a short leash, but he's wrong. Kabuto revealed the seal on his stomach as he reached for it. I have all of Orochimaru's powers. He rubbed the area where his seal was only for his skin to begin to peel off. No harm can come to this body. Now you are ready for the final stage of my plan, Yugo. Yugo didn't reply, he just continued to stare into space, making Kabuto smirk. I knew I could count on you. With that, Kabuto laughed, causing it to echo in the dark hallway. XXX. Madara emerged from the darkness of the tunnel as Sasuke approached him. Is the army ready? Madara asked, looking at Sasuke with his new Rinnegan eye. Yes. Sasuke stared at the wavy eye as Madara tilted his head in confusion. Why did you disgrace your Uchiha body with that eye? Because to finish what we started, I need this eye. Madara watched as Sasuke snarled. And besides, this eye belonged to me long before Nagato. So, naturally, I'm taking back what belongs to me. Madara turned just as Zetsu appeared in front of him. Status. The army is moving toward Konoha and should arrive by nightfall. Madara smiled beneath his mask. Excellent. Madara turned to Sasuke, who was looking around with a bored expression. Sasuke, you know what to do. Sasuke turned his Sharingan eyes on Madara with a smile. Yes. With that, Sasuke vanished in a burst of black fire. He's getting better with his control over Amaterasu. Madara stated as he looked at the scorched ground where Sasuke lay. You know he's planning to kill you. Zetsu's eyes widened as Madara chuckled. Yeah, it's quite fun. Madara turned his eyes to Zetsu. But by the time he tries anything, it'll be too late. I'll go ahead with the plan. But you don't have the Kyuubi. Zetsu watched as Madara summoned the Geto Mazo. Zetsu noticed someone had started sealing it as his body fell from the dragons to the cold ground. I don't have half of the Kyuubi. Madara looked at Minato's body. He put the other half inside himself, but now it belongs to me. But how is that possible? Zetsu asked, narrowing his eyes at Madara. He may have sealed the other half of the Kyuubi within himself, but surely the Shinigami devoured it along with his soul. He did, but he didn't foresee the ultimate power of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Madara's eye seemed to twitch as he looked at Minato's body. Izanami, she who invites, is the power to resurrect the dead completely by drawing their soul from death. It can even bring them back even if they are in the Shinigami's stomach. But this is not without its drawbacks. The longer the person has been dead, the more Sharingan eyes you must sacrifice. Now comes the beginning of the end for Konoha and Madara Uchiha's rule. Even if he does, his plan won't work without both halves. Zetsu watched as Minato's body slowly disintegrated into ash. I won't be able to throw Tsukuyomi to the moon, Madara announced as the statue began to glow. But I'll still be able to use the Jubi, ten-tailed beast. I'm simply sealing Jubi within me a little beforehand. Then, when Naruto is within my grasp, I'll take care of Sasuke and then the world. Madara watched as the statue slowly sank into the ground once more with a smile. Now I think it's time you paid Konoha a little visit, Zetsu. Zetsu nodded and sank into the ground with a smile. Soon the world will bow at my feet. With that, Madara left to finish the last of his plan. XXX. Sasuke watched with his Sharingan as Zetsu's army began marching towards Konoha with a gleeful smile. Soon Konoha will pay for what they did, brother, Sasuke said as he began walking towards Konoha as well. And when I'm done with Naruto, I'll see Madara face the same fate. With that, Sasuke began to laugh as he thought about fulfilling his revenge. Sasuke never noticed Zetsu below him listening to his every word. What a stupid boy, Zetsu thought with a smile as he continued traveling beneath Sasuke. He has no idea what Madara is about to become. Zetsu poked his head out of the ground behind Zetsu and looked up at the moon, seeing that it was pure red. Soon all will fall to the power of Madara Uchiha. Zetsu turned and followed Sasuke with a smile of pure pleasure. Kakashi looked at Konoha with a puzzled expression until Tsunade appeared behind him. What are you doing? Kakashi turned to her with a worried look in his eyes. I just have this strange feeling. Kakashi turned back to the quiet village. Something's not right. Tsunade looked around with narrowed eyes as she scanned the village as well. I know what you mean, he said as he looked at Kakashi. I felt the same way since we got back. Kakashi turned to look at Tsunade when he noticed a human form slowly disappearing into the ground. I knew it. Kakashi gritted his teeth. There was something there a second ago that looked like that Akatsuki plant. Tsunade turned and looked at the same spot as she slowly reached for the tag attached to her waistband. This is bad, Tsunade muttered as she pulled off the tag, causing it to light up. She tossed it into the air just as it exploded, lighting up the dark skies above Konoha, causing several shinobi to wake up. People of Konoha, we are under attack. This caught everyone's attention as they scrambled to prepare just as Zetsu appeared in front of Kakashi and Tsunade. You ruined all the fun I was going to have. Zetsu lowered his head with a disappointed sigh. But I guess we can do this the hard way. With that, Zetsu smiled at Tsunade, sending a shiver down her spine. Right, Sasuke? Kakashi turned around just as Sasuke appeared in a swirl of black flames. Sasuke glared at Kakashi with his eternal Mangekyo as his hair covered the top of his eyes. This is going to be fun, Sasuke replied as he licked his lips while Kakashi lifted his headband. I told you Konoha was going to burn to the ground. Kakashi glared at Sasuke as the village began to move just as Zetsu's army appeared on the ground. XXX. Naruto was about to go to sleep when a buzzing sound woke him with a start. He ran to his desk and opened it to reveal labels with different symbols on each. Naruto gritted his teeth when he saw the leaf symbol burst into flames. Konoha. Naruto immediately set to work waking the Uchiha shinobi. Uchiha appeared behind Naruto with a tired look in his eyes. What's wrong, Naruto? Uchiha muttered as he stifled a yawn. They're attacking Konoha. Naruto looked at Uchiha seriously as this brought him out of his tired stupor. I'll have everyone get organized. Uchiha bowed as he disappeared, leaving Naruto behind, who just stared in the direction of Konoha. So it begins, Naruto thought as he turned and left to prepare the village. XXX. Kakashi dodged a Chidori aimed at his head by Sasuke and quickly kicked the Uchiha off the building. He leaped after him with his normal eye closed, focusing his attention on his Sharingan. There's no escape this time, Sasuke, Kakashi shouted while Sasuke smiled at his former mentor. Who says I want to escape? Sasuke began charging his hand with lightning. I'm perfectly happy right here. Chidori Iso, sharp spear of 1,000 birds. Sasuke swung his arm at Kakashi just as the lightning shot straight out. Kakashi jerked his head around just as the lightning blade passed through his head. Kakashi twisted his body just in time to land on his feet and form a hand sign. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu. Kakashi fired the fireball only for it to collide with Sasuke's Amaterasu barrier. How sad. Sasuke smiled from the black fire. Guess it's my turn. Kakashi's eyes widened as the fire came toward him in a giant wave. If I dodge, Konoha will be reduced to ash. Kakashi gritted his teeth as his Sharingan began to transform. Kamui. Sasuke watched as his fire was carried to another dimension, leaving behind a blackened land. Kakashi looked around as several civilians ran towards the Hokage monument with several shinobi for cover. Don't worry, I'll take care of you next. Kakashi looked at Sasuke, who smiled back. Now, where were we? Kakashi watched as black fire erupted from beneath Sasuke and expanded around him. Kakashi charged into a Raikiri as it leaped out of his hand and began to spark as it hit the ground. Raitun, Urafunida, lightning release, wolf pack. Kakashi looked at Sasuke as 5 different lightning-shaped wolves. We were just finishing this up. Sasuke mocked Kakashi as Amaterasu danced around them. Then let's get this over with, Kakashi-sensei. Black fire swirled around Sasuke like a small tornado as he leaped towards Kakashi and his lightning pack. XXX, it's a lot to ask, Naruto announced to the gathered shinobi. But I'm asking you to join me in what will be a war. The shinobi looked at each other with worried looks in their eyes. We need to work with the other villages to defeat Akatsuki. So I'm asking you not as a leader, but as a friend, if you'll help me. Tensa smiled from the crowd as she raised her arm. I will join you in this cause. Tensa shouted to be heard. Me too, came Haku's reply. You don't even have to ask, came Yukaken's cheer. Soon, the entire village was cheering to join Naruto's mission. Thank you all. Naruto smiled at them all. But we can't leave our village undefended. I can only take at least 5. This brought a murmur of confusion to the crowd. We're still growing as a hidden village with very few ninja to form our forces. I want to leave the rest of you here in case Madara tries something against us. The group nodded with smiles on their faces. I can have a specially made suit of armor ready to give us, Tensa announced while clapping her hands as a large amount of smoke appeared. The suit of armor in question was completely black with a blue swirl on each one. The seals on them allow you to create barriers and shoot high-pressure water from each palm. Tensa smiled as the entire group began to grab the armor and started dressing for the coming war. Tensa approached Naruto, who was with Haku, Yukaken, and Enmitsuki. So, who's the 5th in this little group? You mean the room? Yukaken looked at Enmitsuki, who glared at him. You're staying here. The hell I am. Enmitsuki shouted as he punched Yukaken in the arm. I'm not going to be left out again. This is not up for discussion. Yukaken shouted angrily. Is there anything I should know? Naruto asked as he looked between the two. No, Naruto. Enmitsuki looked at the ground with a slight blush as Naruto continued to look up and down until he smiled. So how long? Yukaken cursed as he walked away from Naruto. I found out 2 days ago. Enmitsuki tried to put some distance between herself and Naruto, but he quickly gave her a deep hug. Congratulations, you two. Naruto smiled at both Yukaken and Enmitsuki, who smiled back at Naruto. You two always made a cute couple. Yukaken looked back at Enmitsuki. I can't allow you or our son to be injured in the war. Yukaken grabbed Enmitsuki by the shoulders. Please stay here. Enmitsuki looked like he was about to argue, but he smiled. I think I can play babysitter one last time. Enmitsuki looked at Yukaken with tears in her eyes. But promise me you'll come back safe and sound. I promise. Yukaken gave her a deep kiss as he hugged her tightly. He pulled away as he walked away with a deep fire in his eyes. Let's end this war. Naruto nodded as Tensa and Yukaken placed their hands on his shoulders. We'll be back. With that, the 3 disappeared into a giant whirlpool of water, leaving behind a village preparing for battle. XXX. Kakashi dodged a giant skeletal hand engulfed in black fire as he glared at his final 2 lightning dogs. This is bad. Kakashi looked around to see the other Konoha shinobi slowly falling beneath the waves of Zetsu. At this rate, we'll get the better of them. Kakashi ducked and then leaped onto a nearby building and began running across the rooftops as Sasuke began to laugh. This is fun for me. Sasuke's eyes were wild and blazed in the black fire. The great Kakashi running away from me. Kakashi grinned under his mask as he saw his 2 dogs leap out of the ground right behind Sasuke. Sasuke turned just in time to see the dogs descend upon him in a burst of lightning. Kakashi skidded to a stop and activated his Mangekyo, already knowing what Sasuke activated. You can't break through Susanu's power dash. Sasuke stopped as he saw the area in front of his head begin to spin in a vortex. Kamui! Kakashi's Mangekyo spun once before tearing the Susanu's armor piece off. Kakashi then grabbed a kunai with explosive tags and quickly threw it at the hole. But Susanoo quickly raised his arm to defend himself, causing an explosion that pushed the giant back. Kakashi fell to one knee as his chakra took a huge hit from using Kamui. He watched as the giant loaded an arrow into his bow and aimed it at Kakashi. Goodbye, Kakashi. The giant fired as the arrow headed straight for Kakashi as he slowly closed his eyes, knowing he couldn't dodge the projectile. Hakusho Kaiten, 8 trigrams, palms, heavenly spin. Kakashi's eyes widened as a spinning chakra dome appeared in front of him, allowing the arrow to collide, sending it hurtling to the right, destroying the building it crashed into. Time you were put in your place, boy. Hayashi stopped spinning as Hinata, Shikamaru, Sakura, Niji, and Lee appeared in front of Kakashi. Sakura looked at Sasuke as he frowned at the group in front of him. Sasuke, what are you doing? Sasuke turned his emotionless gaze on Sakura, who flinched at his cold eyes. I'm destroying Konoha. Sasuke finally let his smile show. That's my new dream. Sasuke let out a laugh that made the entire group flinch as he continued to laugh at them. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes as everyone got into a different fighting stance. Now who dies first? Shikamaru's shadow began to slither towards Sasuke, who kept his smile. Sasuke jumped with his Susanoo, grabbing onto a building, pulling him up to the rooftop. You're all doomed. Sasuke's Susanoo loaded another arrow into the crossbow and aimed it at the group. The Susanoo fired the arrow, but just as the group jumped to avoid the arrow, another one was sent at them. That giant is constantly reloading his crossbow at the drop of a hat. Shikamaru thought as he hid behind some rubble. That takes quite a bit of chakra to fire it so quickly. Shikamaru nodded at Lee, who nodded in agreement and removed his training weights. Lee leaped out from behind his hiding place and disappeared in a burst of speed, reappearing right behind Sasuke. Sasuke turned his head as a burst of green chakra erupted from Lee as he aimed a punch at the Susanoo. Fool! Sasuke yelled as Susanoo swung his arm, connecting with Lee, sending him angling into the ground. Who's next? Dash. Sasuke never finished his question as Hayashi, Hinata, and Niji jumped in front of him, swinging their palms forward. Hakuha Kisho, 8 trigrams, empty wall palm. Sasuke felt the wave of chakra hit his Susanoo as he was pushed off the building. Hayashi landed on the ground only to disappear and appear above Sasuke. Hak Hazangeki, 8 trigrams, mountain crusher. Hayashi swung both palms forward, sending a visible wave of chakra at Sasuke. Susanoo crossed his arms in front of Sasuke as he was blasted by the chakra wave, forcing him to the ground and causing a giant cloud of dirt and dust to shoot upwards. Hayashi landed beside the crater, glaring at the flare of chakra that erupted from the rubble as Sasuke slowly emerged. Hayashi's eyes widened slightly as Sasuke's chakra began to become more erratic by the second. Is that all you've got? The smoke cleared, revealing Sasuke with his head tilted to the side with blood trickling from his left eye. Enten, Gojinka, blaze release, volcanic eruption. Everyone started looking around as the ground began to shake as Sasuke started laughing. This is the end. Hayashi looked down at the ground just in time to see the ground split beneath him. He jumped back just as an Amaterasu pillar erupted from the ground, nearly incinerating Hayashi. Father! Hinata started running towards her father only for an Amaterasu pillar to erupt in front of her. Stay back, Hinata! Hayashi turned to his daughter with fire in his eyes as he slowly turned his attention back to Sasuke. You dare raise your hand against my daughter. I will make you pay for trying to destroy the very source of my pride. Hayashi charged, his body glowing with chakra. Hak Bishamon, 8 trigrams Bishamon. Chakra began to form around Hayashi almost like armor as he continued towards Sasuke, deadly intent shining in his white eyes. This is the blade that will end your existence. Hayashi thrust out his palm as a beam of chakra spread out in a thin blade. Sasuke jumped just in time to avoid the chakra blade, but the blade sliced through a piece of destroyed building harmlessly. Sasuke drew his own sword and brought it down at Hayashi, who spun around, bringing the chakra blade down on Sasuke's stomach. Sasuke smirked at Hayashi as he looked down at Sasuke. What am I supposed to? Sasuke suddenly began to tremble as he felt his chakra points begin to close. Damn! Sasuke jumped back away from the chakra blade as Hayashi stood ready. So that blade isn't meant to cause external damage, but internal damage. You're right, Uchiha. Hayashi snarled as he watched the black fire circle around them. It closes off the chakra points until only a few remain. This attack is designed to close off chakra points until the only ones left are the ones near your cold heart. Sasuke narrowed his eyes as Neji and Hinata looked on in shock. You die because your own chakra crushes your heart into dust. With that, Hayashi leaped towards Sasuke, who only smiled at him as more Amaterasu flames erupted around him. Your power will never reach me. Sasuke smirked as he saw the rage flash in Hayashi's eyes. My hatred and anger are stronger than yours. Sasuke charged his sword with lightning as a dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. The two collided in the midst of the fire, both glaring at the other as they sought to gain the advantage. Sasuke leapt at Hayashi as he swung his sword repeatedly, but Hayashi's chakra armor held firm, causing Sasuke to growl in frustration. Sasuke landed on his feet and threw his sword into the air as he charged into a Chidori. Sasuke charged towards the Hyuga leader as he extended his palms. Sasuke swung his Chidori just as Hayashi swung his right palm. The two attacks collided, causing the ground beneath the impact to begin to crack. Hayashi narrowed his eyes as he began to focus more chakra into his palm, forcing Sasuke back. You'll die here. Hayashi growled as he swung his left palm straight towards Sasuke's chest. Sasuke watched as the palm moved towards his chest, and just as it was about to connect, he spun around. I will not die by anyone's hands. Sasuke smirked as his Mangekyo spun, causing black flames to flicker. But it doesn't look so good for your daughter. Sasuke turned his head and locked eyes with Hinata, causing the Amaterasu to rush towards her. Hinata went to move out of the line of fire but found herself unable to move. Hinata looked down to see a white Zetsu pinning her legs, keeping her perfectly still. Hinata looked back just in time to see her father disappear in a blur of speed. Everyone covered their eyes as flames exploded after colliding with Hinata, causing laughter to pierce the air. It is done. Kakashi glared as his Mangekyo began to spin, locking onto Sasuke, who only smiled back as the flames began to die down. I'd look where Hinata's standing. Kakashi didn't move an inch until he heard a groan of pain. He looked toward the source only to find Hinata unharmed, but standing in front of her was Hayashi. Are you okay? Hayashi asked, turning his head until only one of his eyes looked at Hinata. Father, Hinata asked, trembling as she saw blood beginning to drip from Hayashi's mouth. Hayashi fell back at that exact moment only to be caught by Hinata. Hinata looked down at Hayashi's burned body with fist-sized craters scattered around his chest. Why did you jump in the way? Hayashi smiled at his daughter as his Byakugan deactivated. It's a father's duty to protect his family. Hayashi coughed as more blood began to flow from his mouth. I'm sorry, Hinata. Hinata looked at her father as tears began to well up. What for? Hinata asked, already dreading his answer. For not being able to watch you grow into the strong, brave woman I know you will become. Hayashi gently lifted his hand and rubbed his daughter's cheek. Promise me you'll never change, Hinata. I won't have to. Hayashi smiled a little wider at those words. Because I'm going to take you to a doctor. Hinata, you and I both know it's too late. Hayashi felt his eyelids grow heavy, but he kept them open. I'll always be there for you, Hinata. Remember that. Hinata nodded as Hayashi finally closed his eyes and fell limp. Everyone looked at Sasuke, who simply smiled at all the stares. What can I say? Sasuke shrugged and stuck his neck out as he glared at them. Love is the point. Suddenly, the handle of a cane slammed into Sasuke's face and sent him spinning into a building. Everyone looked at the newcomers only to see Naruto holding his cane with potent fire deep in his blue eyes. Sasuke emerged from the rubble with a furious glare just as Yukakin, Tensa, and Konan appeared next to Naruto. So you finally came. What have you done? Naruto growled with barely contained anger. Sasuke chuckled at Naruto's words as he looked towards the grieving Hinata. I showed her what the pain of losing a family member is like. Sasuke stopped smiling as a burst of chakra created a 2-foot-wide crater beneath Naruto. So you finally understand. I'm an avenger. Sasuke got into a fighting stance, but Naruto suddenly appeared beside him in a burst of light. Sasuke spun his stance just as Naruto kicked him in the face, sending him straight out of Konoha and towards their final fight. Naruto turned to Hinata, who looked up at that exact moment. Naruto. Naruto flinched at the pain in her voice as he looked at Konan, who nodded. Hinata, I promise you this won't happen again, Naruto announced as he turned his attention to where Sasuke had landed. Hayashi-sama was a good man and a great father. I promise his sacrifice won't be in vain. With that, Naruto disappeared in a burst of speed, leaving 2 footprint-shaped craters behind. Konan, Tensa, and Yukaken walked towards the Konoha group. We also brought some help. Konan pointed to the mountains behind Konoha just as a wave of shinobi began to appear. We went to all the hidden villages and told them what was happening, and they immediately began sending their troops. Kakashi nodded to Konan as Tensa walked forward. Let's get this party over with, Tensa announced as she cracked her knuckles. Kotan, Hankyo, Steel Release, Stronghold. Tensa's body began to ripple as her skin turned black and blades began to sprout from her wrists and back. Everyone watched with wide eyes as she blasted her neck and wrist with a wide grin. This is going to be fun. With that, Tensa charged towards the oncoming Zetsu horde. XXX. Sasuke clutched his left arm as he stumbled out of the forest with an angry expression as he came across an open valley with 2 statues. It started here, Sasuke said as Naruto appeared behind him. And it'll end here. Sasuke jumped just as Naruto's staff swung towards him. Why did you kill Hayashi? Naruto shouted with anger in his voice, causing Sasuke to smirk. Why didn't you try to heal him? Sasuke tilted his head to the side, a sinister glint in his eyes. Madara has told me all about the properties of the Kyuubi's Yang chakra. So, again, why not stay and heal him? Because I could only keep him alive and continue providing life. Naruto narrowed his eyes at his former teammate. But he would continue to die from his injuries no matter what I or anyone else did. I couldn't put Hinata through that again or make Hayashi feel that pain over and over again. Sasuke threw his head back and laughed. That's pathetic, Naruto, Sasuke shouted. You didn't heal him because you would have lost sight of me. Your whole mission in life was to bring me back to Konoha. Well, what do you think of my little reunion? Do you still want to take me back? Naruto just stared at the ground as his grip on his staff tightened. Well, make your choice. I'm sorry, Naruto said aloud with some sadness. But I won't be able to keep my promise, Itachi. Please forgive me. With that, Naruto charged, knocking down his staff just as he was swallowed by a small hurricane, just as Sasuke clasped his hands together in a tiger seal. Tensa attacked a Zetsu that decided to launch itself at Hinata while he was keeping an eye on her. This is bad. Tensa looked at Hinata as she looked around with a slightly dazed look. I can't keep us both safe. Tensa looked around very quickly and turned to Hinata. Listen, I know it hurts. Hinata looked at Tensa as he smiled at her, a sad tone in his eyes. How do you know? Because I lost my father in much the same way, Tensa explained as the fight continued around the two. But I fought through my heartbreak, because that was what my father would have wanted me to do. With that, Tensa swung her arm, releasing a barrage of metal spikes from her arm. Hinata looked at her father one last time before nodding slightly. Tensa turned just in time to see a Zetsu attempt to leap at him from behind, but it was suddenly blasted apart by a massive wave of chakra. Welcome back, Hinata. Tensa turned her attention back to the horde just as reinforcements arrived. He appeared in front of Hinata and gave her a look before nodding and delivering a crushing blow to a nearby Zetsu clone. Fight with everything you've got, he roared as he disappeared and began storming into the army. Hinata turned around to see a Zetsu leap at her only to be pinned down by a giant clawed foot made of ink. I need help, Sai yelled from atop a giant lizard creature. Hinata smiled as she turned and began scything through any Zetsu that came her way. XXX. Zetsu watched the scene in the distance with a smug look on his face. They think they can actually win. Zetsu slowly shook his head as he stood up. How do I walk? Dashed. Zetsu ducked just as a wisp of wind passed over his head. Who the heck? Dash. Zetsu stopped as he looked at Danzo's bandaged body. So you finally arrived. Danzo slowly began to undo his gauntlet, the pieces falling to the ground. I was wondering when Madara would send you here. And what about that? Zetsu watched as Danzo revealed his 10 Sharingan implanted in his arm. I know what you are. Zetsu winced as Danzo clasped his hands. You are nothing, but a construct of our Shodai Hokage, created from his cells. Zetsu narrowed his eyes at that as he slowly split into his white and black halves. I see you were keeping an eye on Orochimaru. Danzo opened his one telltale eye and stared at the motionless Zetsu. It matters little, for I am stronger than you. Shiro, white, and Kuro, black, leaped away from each other just as Shiro began to multiply. Triple X. Naruto swung his staff in a downward arc just as Saki spat out a fireball. Naruto gritted his teeth as he felt his wind-enhanced staff collide with the fireball, causing the flames to grow. Naruto closed his eyes as he focused on a specific seal on his body, causing a round transparent barrier to form around him. Flames cascaded around his bubble as Naruto stood his ground until the flames died down. That won't be enough, Sasuke. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at Naruto as a smirk spread across his features. I thought that might be the case. Sasuke suddenly exploded into a puff of smoke just as he appeared behind Naruto. Now die! Naruto turned around to see Sasuke swinging a Chidori at Naruto's barrier. Naruto felt the impact as the Chidori began to break Naruto's barrier as Naruto placed his staff on his back and created a Rasengan. Naruto swung his own jutsu just as his barrier broke, colliding with Sasuke's Chidori, creating an ear-piercing scream. The two were finally separated as their respective jutsu exploded, sending them flying off the cliff and into the water below. Naruto twisted his body in the air and landed on the surface of the water, causing it to churn. Sasuke smirked as he kept his body as straight as an arrow and dove into the water. What's he doing too? Naruto thought as he prepared himself for whatever Sasuke had planned. Naruto continued scanning the surface until he saw lightning suddenly begin to dance across the surface towards him. Naruto began to jump back just as the water behind him erupted, revealing Sasuke with his hands clasped together. Katan, Hozenka no Jutsu, Fire Release, Phoenix Sage's Fire Technique. Sasuke spat out 10 small fireballs as they headed for Naruto's back. Naruto flipped the fireballs over while throwing a kunai at Sasuke, who ducked under the sword. Naruto landed on his feet and spun around to kick the side of Sasuke's head. But before the kick could connect, Sasuke grabbed Naruto's leg. Sasuke tossed Naruto into the air while performing another series of hand signs. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu. Sasuke fires a giant fireball at Naruto just as he throws an explosive tag at Sasuke. The area was rocked by the resounding explosion as Sasuke raised his hands to block the fire coming down at him. Sasuke squinted in the smoke but saw movement directly in front of him. He looked down only to see Naruto drive his fist into Sasuke's stomach, sending him skidding back across the water. You've gotten much stronger since we last fought. Sasuke began charging another Chidori as Naruto began channeling his wind chakra into his Rasengan. Don't be mistaken, Sasuke. Naruto kept his eyes permanently fixed on Sasuke. You won't live past today. With that, the two rushed at each other while swinging their jutsu at each other. Chidori, Futon, Rasengan. The two collided once more, causing the water to rise around them and hide them from view. Triple X. A lone shinobi turned around just in time to see a Zetsu's chest split open, revealing spiked protrusions digging into its chest. The Zetsu lifted the dying man up as his blood and chakra began to flow into the Zetsu. The Zetsu pulled the body free of its spikes only to be hit with an intense Katan jutsu. We can't give an inch, Kakashi shouted as he leapt over the Zetsu's burning body. If you know any Katan jutsu, use it. Futon users have their strength increased. He appeared right next to Kakashi along with Inoki, who watched the scene unfold below them. This is pure war against pure attrition. He snarled as he watched another shinobi fall to two Zetsu. If all sides lose most of their army, they'll lose it today, Inoki announced as he began firing small squares at Zetsu's army. Inoki looked at the plant army as a wave of sand engulfed them. We continue to fight, Gaara announced as he stood on a floating cloud of sand. Gaara clenched his fist, causing the sand to float into the air in the form of a ball before collapsing in on itself. We fight to the death. Inoki looked at Gaara, who stood motionless as his sand began to sweep through Zetsu's ranks. Triple X. Danzo leaped back as he spun, unleashing blades of wind that sliced through the Zetsu. I can't lose. Danzo narrowed his eyes as he landed on his feet, arms out in front of him. Did you know Madara made a mistake? Kuro tilted his head to the side as Danzo looked on in confusion. When he moved on to making our clones stronger, he also made us stronger. The clones are roots and we are the tree. Any chakra they gain is transported to us. Kuro then slammed his hands into the ground with enough force to embed them into the rock. Now witness the power of Zetsu. Danzo looked around just as the ground began to shake. Danzo saw a root burst out of the ground and ducked down just as it shot forward. I am the earth. Suddenly, the ground erupted into a forest of roots that surrounded Danzo, who looked around with a gleam in his eyes. So this is their power. Danzo waved his hand as the roots descended upon him. Unfortunately, this isn't on the level of the Shodai. Danzo was instantly impaled as the roots dragged him underground, causing Kuro to smile. This is how the old hawk dies. Kuro turned and was about to join Shiro, but was quickly cut in half by a wind blade. Kuro began to compose himself while Shiro looked at the culprit only to find Danzo staring back at him. Sorry, but this old hawk still has some fight left in him. Danzo leaped down from his perch and began going through a series of hand signs. Futon, Shinkajyoku, wind release, vacuum sphere. Danzo spat out compressed wind bullets that began traveling towards Kuro and Shiro with enough force to pierce through stone. The two plant men sank into the ground, avoiding the bullets completely only for them to appear behind Danzo. Kuro and Shiro grabbed Danzo by the head and gave him a slimy wing, breaking his neck. Kuro and Shiro watched as Danzo's body fell to the ground in a crumpled heap only for him to reappear a couple feet away spinning like a top. This is impossible unless… Kuro looked at Danzo's revealed arm and saw that 3 of the Sharingan were closed. Damn it! Kuro glared at Danzo as he launched wind blades in his spin. How is he using Izanagi? Both Kuro and Shiro jumped, avoiding Danzo's wind attack as Shiro began to multiply once more. This is getting tedious. Danzo thought with a soft sigh as Zetsu's small army charged at him. XXX. Naruto pushed a small rock off of him as he stood up from his spot on the cliff. Where did you disappear to? Naruto looked around for Sasuke but saw no sign of the Uchiha. Naruto then heard the unmistakable sound of birds chirping and ducked down just as Sasuke passed over his head. Naruto looked up and grabbed Sasuke's leg just as he passed over his head and, as violently as possible, shoved him towards the cliff face. Sasuke let out a grunt of pain as Naruto released his grip and jumped back, throwing a kunai with an explosive tag on it. Sasuke opened his eyes just in time for the tag to explode, causing the cliff to collapse on top of him. Naruto kept his eyes on the pile of rocks as he began to move. I know you're still alive, Naruto commented as time passed. There's no point in prolonging this dashed. Naruto's sentence was cut short as he was forced to jump away from a giant skeletal hand. I don't think that'll be a problem, Sasuke announced as the rubble was swept away, revealing his Susanoo. Because your end is here. Susanoo raised his crossbow and leveled it with Naruto before firing. Naruto jumped to the left only for his right shoulder to be grazed by the arrow. Naruto continued running as Sasuke's Susanoo fired more arrows, while Naruto slowly pulled out another kunai with an explosive tag. Naruto threw the kunai only for the giant to push it into the cliff, causing it to crumble further from the resulting explosion. That thing is going to be a pain, Naruto thought as he narrowed his eyes at Sasuke hiding behind his giant sword. I'll have to finish it quickly. Naruto quickly pulled on the Kyuubi's chakra, coating himself in the fiery chakra. This is how it ends. Naruto held out his hand as his black Rasengan began to form. Bijou Rasengan. Naruto raised the orb above his head as water began to swirl around it. Sasuke smirked as he ignited Susanoo with his Amaterasu. Bring it, Naruto. Sasuke rushed towards Naruto with Susanoo raising his gigantic black flame-covered fist into the air. Naruto brought down his Bijou Rasengan as he rushed towards Sasuke with his eyes hardened with determination. Sasuke! Naruto swung the black orb towards Sasuke just as Susanoo brought his fist down. Naruto narrowed his eyes as his Rasengan collided with Sasuke's Amaterasu-enhanced Susanoo, causing the area to begin shaking as the two exploded with enough force to break the two statues. XXX. Tensa growled as a group of Zetsu violently threw him to the ground and soon jumped over him. This is getting ridiculous. Tensa thought as she made swords sprout from her metal body, piercing each individual Zetsu. We have to stick together. Yukaken appeared next to Tensa with a Zetsu grabbed with both hands as she snapped their necks. Seriously. Yukaken drew his sword with a flourish as he sliced a charging Zetsu in half. You kill one, two more take their place. At this rate, we'll soon be overrun. Tensa nodded as she shot the blades from her body, piercing several more Zetsu in the process. Not again. Tensa replied as his body turned to steel once more. Koton. Bochiken. Steel release. Graveyard blade. Tensa slammed the ground with both fists as swords began to shoot out of the ground in front of him. Advancing. The Zetsu in front of him jumped out of the way only for him to strike a new line of swords, catching them off guard. This is so stupid. Tensa commented as he punched away at a Zetsu that pierced through his sword field. Why do we have to fight plant people? Yukaken smirked and shrugged as he slashed at another Zetsu. Just bad luck, I guess. Yukaken replied as he charged towards another group of Zetsu. XXX. Danzo reappeared once more as he was killed by another barrage of roots. 2 more minutes, Danzo recounted as he looked into his remaining eyes. I have to beat him by then. Kuro smiled as he watched Danzo look at his arm. Izanagi is almost finished. Danzo looked at the dark plant as Kuro lowered himself to the ground and placed his hand on the ground. Danzo jumped, avoiding the spiky roots as Shiro grabbed him from behind. Danzo turned to Shiro just as a root stabbed him straight in the chest. Danzo looked down as blood began to pour from his mouth as he looked at his Sharingan arm only to see everyone's eyes closed. A special little mushroom, Kuro announced, causing Danzo to turn to him. It allows us to control everything you see, but the problem is we can only control one thing at a time. So we made you think you had 2 minutes in your Izanagi when you had none. Now you will die here. Shiro smiled at Danzo, who looked at him with an emotionless look in his single eye. What are the final words? Futon, Seishuarashi, wind release, gathering storm. Both Kuro and Shiro looked on in confusion as the wind began to pick up, surrounding Danzo. What is this little dash? Shiro never finished as the wind rose with violent speed, knocking both Zetsu against Danzo as the wind kept them off the ground. I can die, Danzo said with cold efficiency in his voice. But you will fall to me. Danzo freed his hands as he clapped them together as black kanji began to spread across his body. Yura Shisho Fuinjutsu. The black kanji shot out of Danzo's body and began to spread across the area in an orb. For Konoha, Danzo shouted his last words as the orb closed in and sucked everything trapped into Danzo's body to die. Danzo stood for a few more seconds before collapsing to the ground with a small smile on his face. XXX. Everyone watched as Zetsu's army began to wither and fall to the ground. Did we win? A random shinobi asked as he kicked a Zetsu in the side. Everyone looked at each other in confusion at first, but then burst into cheers of happiness and joy. How beautiful! Came a mysterious snake-like voice, causing everyone to turn to face a horrifying sight. Orochimaru stood in front of them, but right behind him stood Kakuzu, Hanzo, Kimimaro, Bakura, and Gari. Now we can turn your happiness and joy into nothing but dust. Konan appeared in a flurry of paper, but froze once she saw Hanzo looking at her. Well, if it isn't the paper bitch. Hanzo narrowed his eyes at her with hatred in them as he gently began walking toward her with dangerous intent in every step. I'm going to enjoy this, Hanzo. Konan growled as her body began to separate into paper. I thought I'd never have to see you again. Unfortunately, you have no other choice. Hanzo slammed his palm against the ground as he was covered in smoke. When the smoke cleared, everyone saw Hanzo riding a giant salamander. Now you're going to die. Konan simply disappeared in a flutter of paper as she scattered across the area, while the other reincarnated shinobi attacked. XXX. Naruto was lying on his back in the water as the entire cliff on the side of the wooden statue collapsed into the river. That hurts. Naruto grumbled as he looked at his right palm to see it burned and barely healing. Guess I put a lot of power behind that attack. Naruto leaned over to see Sasuke embedded in the cliff. Guess you're almost done too. Sasuke looked at Naruto with his Sharingan still active. I'm stronger than you, Sasuke muttered as he pushed himself off the wall and fell into the water. And I'll kill you. Sasuke stood up on shaky legs as the sound of rushing air filled Naruto and Sasuke's ears. They both turned towards the sound only to see a creature with vent-like protrusions on its back heading straight for Sasuke. Sasuke's eyes widened as the creature collided with him hard as it continued to take Sasuke with it. Naruto watched as the creature flew away with Sasuke only to see it drop him in the forest. What the heck? Are you awake too? Naruto growled as he stood in front of the culprit, but already knowing who it was. Kabuto. Kabuto smiled at Naruto with excitement in his eyes. Kabuto clasped his hands, causing two coffins to appear next to him. Oh, you know how to cause a little chaos. The coffins opened, revealing two men with whisker marks on their faces, just like Naruto. What is this feeling? Naruto's body actually began to shudder as he stood up. Who are those two? The larger of the two frowned at Naruto in disgust. Are we really that forgotten? He said with an air of power in his voice. My name is Kinkaku, Golden Horn, and this is my brother Ginkaku, Sliver Horn. Hey look bro, he has the same chakra as us. Ginkaku smiled at Naruto, who looked at them. And the same markings on our faces. You're right. Kinkaku rested his arm on the gourd at his neck. This must be the new Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Kitsune. How's the old fox? Ginkaku crossed his arms with a smile on his face. How do you have his chakra? Naruto asked with a flash of anger in his eyes. Oh, we were ordered to capture the Kyuubi when it didn't have a host. Kinkaku replied with a hint of anger in his voice. But the fox ate us, and we stayed in its stomach for 2 weeks until we forced it to vomit. So you absorbed some of her chakra from your time inside her stomach. Naruto couldn't believe what he'd just heard. But that's impossible dash. Impossible, you say? Ginkaku shouted as he and his brother jumped off the cliff and landed in the water. But nevertheless, we're here for you to see. Yes, now is the time. Kinkaku leaned back and opened his mouth to reveal 2 handles at his throat. He pulled them out, revealing a fan and a sword. Brother, if you don't mind. Ginkaku gave his brother a dangerous smile as he pulled a rope from his mouth and gave it to his brother. Now what? Naruto thought as Kinkaku passed the sword to his brother. You're confused, I can tell. Kinkaku smirked at Naruto, who just gritted his teeth in anger. Well, don't be, we'll gladly tell you what we have. In our hands and in the gourds, we have the Rakuto Sannin no Hogu, treasured tools of the Sage of 6 Paths. Naruto's eyes widened as the two charged at him with a burst of speed. This day just keeps getting better, Naruto thought as he watched Kinkaku swing his rope-covered arm toward him. Konan dodged another stream of fire coming from Hanzo's salamander as she smiled gleefully at him. You can't beat me. Hanzo grinned as his salamander began shooting fireballs at Konan. Without that fool Nagato with you, you're as good as dead. Konan narrowed her eyes at Hanzo. I'm going to crush you. Konan growled as the paper began to surround the two, hiding them from the others. Hanzo looked at the paper with a smile on his face as his salamander shot a jet of fire toward the paper. This is how you'll do it. Hanzo stopped as he noticed the flashes of seals on the tags. Explosive tags. The area exploded, cracking the ground and toppling nearby buildings as the fight raged on. Konan began to reform in the smoke and rubble, frowning. That won't be enough, Konan thought as Hanzo's form began to emerge from the rubble. Konan couldn't help but smile at Hanzo, who was missing half his face along with his left arm. I guess I can hurt you, bitch. It seems you've grown stronger since our last encounter. Hanzo shouted in pure rage as his body began to reform. But I will make you pay for killing my salamander. Hanzo clasped his hands in a snake sign, rage boiling behind his eyes. Katan. Shikyaku no Ryu. Fire release. Incinerating dragon. Hanzo leaned back and opened his mouth as he looked up and unleashed a massive stream of fire into the sky. Konan watched as the flame continued upward before expanding into the shape of wings and a dragon's head. Hanzo smirked down at the dragon as it blinked with deadly purpose. This is the end of you. The dragon flew up behind him only to swoop down towards Konan with its mouth agape. This is bad. Conan thought as she made a move to jump out of his way, but was caught in the middle by Hanzo. "You're not going anywhere." Hanzo smirked at Conan as the dragon consumed them both, pouring fire everywhere, forcing everyone to take to higher ground or be trapped. The fire spread in a circle of about 200 feet before shooting upwards in a pillar, destroying everything and everyone caught in the blast. Everyone who survived watched as the flames died down, revealing Hanzo reforming with a triumphant smile on his face. "I win." Hanzo walked away from the pile of ash on the ground only to be stopped by a paper chain wrapped around his leg. "You fell for the same trick twice," Conan announced, appearing right in front of him. "Once when you fought Nagato and me, and right now." Hanzo glared at Conan as the paper rose up her body, halting her hand movements. "Without your salamander aiding your Katan Jutsu, you're just like anyone else. I'll make sure you die here, Hanzo, and this time you'll stay dead." At this, Hanzo smiled at her, a violent light in his eyes. "Oh, and how are you going to do that?" Hanzo declared as his body was covered up to his neck. "With Edo Tensei, I'll keep coming back no matter what you do. So go ahead. Give it all you've got, weakling, you'll just die tired anyway." Conan smiled at him as they both disappeared in a flurry of paper. Hanzo looked around as the two appeared over a deep crater in the ground. "And what are you going to do?" "I'm going to take you to this abyss so you can rot forever," Conan said emotionlessly as the paper began to peel away from Hanzo. "I'm going to crawl out." Hanzo smirked at him. "And then I'll find you and kill you." Conan simply pulled a small tag from her pocket and placed it on Hanzo's forehead. Suddenly, Hanzo's body went stiff as a stick, confusing him. "Naruto gave each of us one of these tags in case Madara or anyone else showed up to fight us. I think he knew Kabuto was going to betray him. It's funny." Hanzo gritted his teeth as the paper peeled away and dropped into the chasm below. Hanzo kept his eyes locked directly into Conan's as she caused her paper to fly out the hole behind him. Conan clasped her hands in a tight seal as she began pouring chakra into the explosive tags mixed with her paper. "Goodbye, Hanzo." The tags exploded, causing the crater to collapse in on itself and bury Hanzo beneath tons of rubble. Conan fell to the ground with a tired look in her eyes, but a smile on her face as she turned back to Konoha to see an approaching figure. "It worked." "Yes, he did." Yukaken smiled at Conan as he lifted her up onto his shoulder. "We need to help you." Yukaken pulled a tag from his pocket as he tapped it on his chest, causing a glow to appear. "You can't leave the others behind," Conan declared weakly. "Tensa can take care of himself," Yukaken announced as Conan and Yukaken were covered in the glow. "And Naruto can handle anything thrown at him." With that, the two disappeared in a burst of light. "But I can't shake the feeling that something bad is about to happen," Yukaken thought before disappearing into the light. XXX. Naruto skidded across the water as a column of black fire erupted behind him. "Sasuke is handling himself." Naruto turned his attention to the two brothers who smiled at him with mirth in their eyes. "I'll deal with Sasuke when I'm done with these three." Naruto turned his gaze to Kabuto, who flinched as Naruto felt his chakra surge. "What just happened?" "Oh, Hanzo couldn't eradicate Konoha, so I finished the jutsu for him." Kabuto's eyes flashed with a dangerous glint. "I don't need a useless tool." With that, Kinkaku seized his opportunity and struck Naruto with his rope. Naruto felt something start to rise in his mouth until a white orb with kanji letters appeared in front of his face. "Noro, Shikasaiken, Curse, 7-star sword." Ginkaku slashed down from the sky, severing the tendril connecting the orb to Naruto, sending Naruto tumbling backward. Rokuon Shiro, Beni Hiseigo, Record, Crimson Gourd. Naruto watched as the orb was absorbed into the gourd, leaving him confused and slightly exhausted. "What the hell was that?" Naruto managed to gasp out as he coughed. Ginkaku looked at his sword as the word promise appeared on the blade. "Oh, just the beginning of the end." The two brothers shared a look of excitement as they watched Naruto look at them. XXX. Lee dodged as Kimimaro sent another barrage of bones his way. "I'm sorry to have to fight you in such an unyouthful state," Lee announced with a typically sad tone. But to protect my home, I won't stop. I will protect Orochimaru-sama. Kimimaro announced in an emotionless voice. I have been given a second chance to protect and serve him. So I will do everything in my power to crush you to dust. Lee nodded as Kimimaro placed his hands on the ground as his curse mark began to spread across his body. Sawarabi no Mai, Dance of the Fern Seedling. Lee knew what was coming and already began jumping from the ground to a nearby building when a forest of bones shot out of the ground. This time, I'll see the full capabilities of this bone forest. Lee muttered to himself as Kimimaro backed into a large bone only to merge with it. Here it comes. Lee ducked just as a spear-shaped barrage of bone shot out from behind him. Lee turned just in time to see Kimimaro appear in front of him, his arm encased in a bone spear. Goodbye! Kimimaro swung the spear at Lee, but just as he was about to strike, Lee ducked as he delivered a viscous kick to Kimimaro's chin, sending him skyward. Now's my chance, Lee said as he leaped into the air to follow. Kimimaro watched with deadpan eyes as Lee wrapped him in his bandages. But just as Lee was about to turn Kimimaro over, bones popped out of his skin. Lee grabbed one of the bones and used it to knock Kimimaro to the ground with enough force to create a small hole in the ground. That was too close. Lee landed on a building only to be forced to jump off it as a barrage of bones was sent hurtling towards him. You can't kill me, Kimimaro commented as he stood up and popped his collar back into place with a sickening crunch. I'm already dead. Lee watched as Kimimaro's arm began to straighten back to normal. I may have no choice but to use them, Lee thought, his thoughts dark. XXX. Gaara watched as another sea of snakes was sent his way as a wall of sand blocked their path. You killed my father, Gaara commented softly with a dead look in his eyes. Orochimaru mocked the Kazekage with a slight twinge of amusement. So what? Orochimaru stated as he had his sword resting on his shoulder. It's not like you two ever truly loved each other. Gaara looked up at Orochimaru just as he came down from the sky with his leg coming down in an arc. Orochimaru looked up with dull eyes as he was sliced in two by the lightning-charged leg. He jumped from his position next to Gaara just as Orochimaru began to reform. You can't kill me, you insignificant idiots. And Gaara narrowed their eyes at the snake man. And soon I'll have a new life. I'll use my jutsu and take control of one of your bodies, and that's how I'll escape Edo Tensei. Orochimaru began to laugh as Gaara and he exchanged glances and nodded to each other. Well then we better finish this quickly, he announced as he signaled, and suddenly a burst of light appeared next to him. But when the light faded, there was a pot next to him. He grabbed the pot and opened the lid as he placed it on his back. Gaara summoned a wave of sand and made it rush at Orochimaru, who just jumped out of the way. He suddenly appeared next to him and struck him with a lightning-charged fist. Orochimaru. Orochimaru smiled at as he took I's fist while raising his sword in the air. Time to die. Orochimaru swung his sword down only to stop as his body began to be pushed down into the pot. What is this? He smiled as he set the jar down and watched Orochimaru begin to disappear into the pot. Kahaku no Johei, amber purifying pot. Orochimaru's eyes widened as he was sealed in the pot, allowing East to close the lid. And Gaara glared at each other until a stream of fire shot into the sky. XXX. Kakuzu was staring at Kakashi with murder in his eyes. Guess I can fight you again. Kakuzu smirked beneath his mask as his black thread began to flow through his body. Lucky me. Kakashi narrowed his eyes as he dodged the wave of black thread, as a giant dragon made of ink collided with Kakuzu, with Sai and Hinata landing right next to Kakashi. Hello, Kakashi-sensei, Sai said with a smile on his face. We thought we could be of help. Kakashi nodded, a smile hidden beneath his mask. As the three turned to Kakuzu, something's wrong, Kakashi thought in confusion as he looked around. If the person who summoned these people with Edo Tensei wanted to destroy Konoha, then they should have summoned more. Instead, they're bringing just enough to keep us busy. Realization hit Kakashi as he narrowed his eyes at Kakuzu. That's it. They want us all busy so they can try to accomplish something. But the question is what? Kakashi looked at Sai, who nodded as he unraveled a scroll and began drawing on it. Hinata activated her Byakugan as two dragons appeared from the scroll. Attack together and watch each other's backs, Kakashi shouted as they charged at Kakuzu. XXX. Sasuke stared at the creature in front of him as he smirked. I'm going to kill you, he shouted in glee, causing Sasuke to frown with a dangerous flare in his eyes. You don't understand who you're messing with, Sasuke declared as his Susanoo formed. I am Sasuke Uchiha and you will die for interrupting my fight. The Susanoo raised its crossbow, but just before it leveled Yugo, it disappeared. Sasuke looked around for Yugo, but couldn't find any sign of him until a ball of chakra exploded against Susanoo. Sasuke felt the air pressure from the explosion and knew if Susanoo wasn't there, he would be dead. Yugo appeared in front of him with a giant fist with a piston on his elbow as he delivered a viscous blow to Sasuke's Susanoo. Sasuke's Susanoo jerked from the impact and was pushed back, but Susanoo simply grabbed Yugo and pulled him away. You're strong, Yugo shouted with a smile filled with bloodlust. I'll make sure to kill you slowly. Sasuke narrowed his eyes as his Susanoo ignited with black flames. XXX. Naruto kept his eyes on Ginkaku, who was still staring at the sword with a smile on his face. Something's not right, Naruto thought, a nervous tone in his thoughts. I don't know what he's planning with that sword dash. Sealing. A growl came from the depths of Naruto's mind. They plan to seal you in that gourd around the little one's neck. Kyuubi. Naruto gritted his teeth, in no mood to deal with his bijou. I don't have time for dash. Then you'll have time. Kyuubi roared with such fury that even Naruto stopped and shuddered. I saw those weapons in action when the Rakuto Sannin was alive. The rope pulls on the soul of whoever is struck by it. The sword curses that soul, and the gourd records it. So why aren't I sealed yet? Naruto questioned with annoyance in his thoughts. Because the requirement to seal you hasn't been met, Kyuubi declared with a growl in his voice. To seal the cursed one, the victim must say the word inscribed on the sword. What? Naruto thought with a worried tone. Then I should keep my mouth shut. That won't do you any good, Kyuubi said with anger in her voice. If you stay silent for too long, they might seal you anyway. But here's the last piece of advice I have for you, brat. Don't say your word. With that, Kyuubi cut the connection, leaving Naruto to ponder what she said. Don't you keep your word? Naruto thought, seeing the smile on Kinkaku's face. I understand the trick to that sword. Kinkaku and Ginkaku's faces fell like stones at Naruto's statement. I can't use my word. The word I've used the most in my life. Congratulations, Kinkaku said as he looked at Naruto. You figured that out pretty well thanks to the Kyuubi. Yeah, he can be a pain, but he comes in handy every now and then, Naruto said with a smile as Kinkaku swung her fan, unleashing a wave of fire toward Naruto. I promise that's the word I can't say. I just have to keep my mouth shut from using that word. Naruto kept his eyes on the two brothers as he pulled out his staff. Oh, so you have a weapon of your own, Ginkaku said with a wicked smile. What can it do? Just watch, was all Naruto said as he pointed the end of his staff at Ginkaku. Ginkaku watched as the staff extended at high speed while glowing with wind chakra. Ginkaku didn't move out of the way as the staff impaled him in the chest. Goodbye, Naruto yelled as he picked Ginkaku up with the end of his staff and threw him at the Madara statue, causing it to collapse into the river. Ginkaku! Naruto turned just in time to receive a viscous punch to the face that sent him tumbling across the river. I'm grateful it's time we stopped playing around. Kinkaku stared at Ginkaku's form slowly emerging from the rubble with his newly reformed arm. My thoughts exactly, brother, Naruto growled as he swung his staff at Kinkaku, who avoided most of the attack, only for his rope arm to be severed. Naruto watched as the arm plunged into the river only to be hit by a wave of wind that sent it crashing into the remains of Madara's statue. Naruto looked up just in time to see Ginkaku and Kinkaku burst forth in their version of the Kyuubi cloak, each with 6 tails. This is bad. Naruto stood up only for his foot to hit 2 objects. He looked down to see the gourd and Ginkaku's sword, making Naruto smirk. Now all I need is that rope, Naruto thought as he sealed the 2 objects into the storage seal on his torso. Naruto jumped out of the rubble with a smile on his face as he charged straight at the 2 brothers. XXX. Lee was leaning against a wall, holding the cut on his stomach as Kimimaro continued searching for it. I have to use it, Lee closed his eyes and began to concentrate as Kimimaro started walking toward him. Please forgive me, Gai-sensei. What are you doing? Kimimaro asked as he raised his spear arm toward Lee's neck. Kaiaman, Gate of Wonders, open. Lee shouted to the sky as he erupted into a pillar of green energy. Kimimaro was pushed back by the sheer force of the released energy as Lee stared at him with no pupils in his eyes. What is this power? Kimimaro never got an answer as Lee disappeared and kicked Kimimaro in the face at the same time. Kimimaro was sent flying through several buildings as he couldn't stop his body. What the hell just happened? Kimimaro was suddenly stopped by a rock-solid object only to look over and see Lee with his fist already coming down to hit him. Kimimaro rolled out of the way only to be thrown into the air from the impact, but just as Kimimaro looked down he didn't see Lee. Kimimaro started looking around until he was knocked further into the air, but when he looked down it was an attack in front of him. I can't keep up, he's moving too fast. Kimimaro was then knocked back and forth in a circle as there appeared to be 3 Lees attacking him. Lee reappeared directly in front of Kimimaro as he directed all of his energy into one final blow. Kajirinai Kotan no Mai, Eternal Chaotic Dance. Lee shouted to the heavens as he punched Kimimaro with enough force to make a cone of steam appear as he was sent back down to earth with enough force to make buildings fall. Lee landed on the outskirts of the crater as what remained of Kimimaro began to reform. But just as Lee was about to charge again, his energy faded away, leaving him in pain. Looks like it's over for you. Kimimaro stopped when Tensa appeared in front of him, placing a seal on his head. Kimimaro's body froze in an instant as Tensa went to see Lee. What is this? This is the end of your new life, Tensa said, her voice as cold as a sword's edge. That specific seal is to immobilize you until someone can deal with you. I'm sorry, but Lee, you had to weaken him enough so that his chakra couldn't repel the seal. Lee smiled at Tensa with a look of pain and understanding. XXX. Kakuzu looked around after the green energy light went out. It seems I'm the last man standing. Kakuzu looked at the group of 3 men in front of him. Now I have all the attention focused on me. Kakashi was about to question what he meant, but that was when Kakuzu's body exploded into a mess of black thread, hiding him underneath as it took form. The threads began to wrap around the last of the standing structure and hoisted the new body up. This is my ultimate form, Kakuzu shouted from atop the creature's head. 1. The mask that represented fire and wind opened up and shot out together, creating a flame that engulfed everything. XXX. Naruto was pushed back as he tried to fight Ginkaku and Kinkaku in his own Jinchuriki form. I may have the advantage in speed and power, but they're working together so well that it's starting to turn in their favor. Naruto thought with some panic as he turned his eyes back to where the rope was below the surface of the water. Time to take him. Naruto disappeared in a burst of light, but just as he reappeared behind Kinkaku, Ginkaku knocked him underwater. This is pathetic, bro. Ginkaku looked at his brother, who simply shook his head in disappointment. It seems dashed. Suddenly, a glowing rope wrapped around the 2 brothers, drawing out their souls. Naruto emerged from the water, spinning the Shikisaiken through both of them. Naruto held out the gourd and watched as the souls poured into it as 2 words appeared on the leaf. Wow! These things really put a strain on you, Naruto said with a small smile as he looked at the 2 brothers. You don't belong in this world anymore. Ginkaku, let's get him. Kinkaku raged as he tore the rope with brute force. You got it, Kinkaku. Ginkaku charged along with his brother, but stopped when Naruto smiled. And that's why I win. Naruto spun the sword around and revealed the 2 words. Kinkaku and Ginkaku. Kinkaku and Ginkaku let out a roar of challenge as they were pulled into the gourd in a split second. Naruto looked at the 2 weapons before sealing them into a single kunai. I'm going to enjoy this, Kabuto declared with a wicked grin. I told you I wanted to fight you, and now I have my chance. Naruto just stared at Kabuto with tired eyes as Kabuto swung his right arm, releasing a wave of snakes as Naruto transformed into his Kyuubi form. Naruto disappeared in a burst of light as Kabuto felt pain flare up where his right arm was. But when he looked down, he didn't see an arm. Kabuto turned around and saw Naruto holding a Bijou Rasengan behind his back. You lost because you believed in manipulating and controlling others. Naruto said in a deadpan tone. I knew you'd use Edo Tensei, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. I'd like to say one last thing. Thank you for helping me. At that, Naruto smiled at Kabuto while continuing to glare at Naruto. Looks like you beat me, Kabuto said with a slight smile as he rolled his eyes and met Naruto's. Goodbye, Kabuto, Naruto said as his Rasengan shot forward, turning into a beam that disintegrated Kabuto. Naruto watched as the chakra beam died down and looked towards where Sasuke was taken and started heading in that direction. We're not done yet, Sasuke, Naruto thought as a growl escaped his mouth. Kakashi dodged a lightning-charged water ball while still using the buildings as a shield. We have to stop him, Kakashi shouted as Gaara, Mei, and Inoki appeared beside him. What are we going to do? Kakashi asked the Kages, but Mei simply smiled and pointed at a lone shinobi standing on a building. He was tall with a scroll tied around his neck and wore a black cloak, but he quickly removed his clothes, revealing a grinning Suigetsu. This is going to be fun, Suigetsu shouted as he opened the scroll and in a puff of smoke held a giant sword with a scroll full of explosive tags. Behold the power of Bakudo, Blast Sword. With that, Suigetsu leaped towards Kakuzu, who sent a wave of black thread at him. My plan is to use Suigetsu as a distraction while we try to take down Kakuzu, Mei finished, still smiling, as Suigetsu lowered his body into the water, allowing the black thread to flow through him. XXX. Naruto looked around the desolate landscape, seeing no sign of Sasuke, but did find the dead remains of Yugo. Sasuke, Naruto muttered as he continued to look around the area, but still found nothing. Naruto turned around and started heading back to Konoha to help with whatever was needed, but he never noticed a rock lift up, revealing a gleaming Sharingan underneath. XXX. Suigetsu laughed as he swung the explosive sword, causing another branch of black thread to fly. I can keep this up all day. Suigetsu smiled with joy in his eyes. Kakuzu looked at Suigetsu as his severed limb repaired itself. I'm going to crush you, Kakuzu shouted. But at that moment Inoki appeared in front of him holding a bucket in his hands. Jintun, Genkai Hakuri no Jutsu, Dust Release, Primitive World Detachment. Inoki fired the cube at Kakuzu, who charged his fire and wind masks, firing them at the cube. Kakuzu's eyes widened as the cube continued on its way, colliding with him. Damn! Kakuzu exclaimed as he looked down to see a ball of lava hit him in the chest. Pathetic cockroaches! Mei smirked as Kakuzu was engulfed in a ball of sand, while and Tsunade appeared in front of Kakuzu with their chakra-filled fists. Kakuzu was sent flying back as his body was already beginning to repair itself. Kakuzu turned around and landed on his feet with a furious glare. You can't beat Dashta. Suddenly, Kakuzu was knocked backward as a new figure entered the fray. You don't want to fuck with me right now, came Naruto's growl as he narrowed his shifting blue eyes at Kakuzu. Do yourself a favor and back off. Kakuzu snarled and immediately charged at Naruto while clasping his hands in a bird sign. FUINJUTSU, Kamiyari, Spear of God. Kakuzu stopped his charge as several spikes erupted from his chest. What is this? Kakuzu yelled as Naruto looked away and started walking towards the ninja force behind him. That's the end of you, Naruto replied simply as Kakuzu let out a roar as the spikes merged together before shooting upwards and turning into something that resembled a star made of spears. I've had a bad day, Naruto grumbled as everyone looked at the Uzumaki in surprise. Hinata was the first to react and was already giving Naruto the biggest hug she could give along with a kiss on the cheek. I'm fine, Hinata, Naruto said with a smile, but that quickly disappeared as he looked around. Where are Yukaken and Konan? Tensa decided to appear at that particular moment. He took Konan to Uzushio to be healed. Tensa said, but she was still tense. But she was supposed to be back by now. Naruto narrowed his eyes and turned his attention toward the direction of Uzushio-gakure. XXX. Yukaken looked around the village from his perch on the tower with a frown. In front of him stood a dark-cloaked figure wearing a mask and Akatsuki robes. So what do you say? Madara smiled at Yukaken, who clenched his fist while Madara maintained his smile under his mask. Yukaken looked back and saw Konan and Enmitsuki leading everyone out of the village. If you join me, this can end. Yes, but I think I'm happy here. Yukakin swung his sword only for Madara to allow it to pass through him. Yukakin went to bring the sword down, but Madara grabbed him by the throat in a burst of speed. I didn't even see it move. Now, Madara said with a sickening glee in his voice. I came here to offer this village the chance to join me, yet you spit it back in my face. Madara shook his head from side to side with a sort of disdain. Now I have to figure out the best way to kill and crush them all. Yukakin's eyes widened as he was thrown with enough force to crash through a line of buildings before coming to a stop at the end of the island. There's no way he's that strong. Yukakin thought. He gritted his teeth in pain. What the hell is he? Yukakin stabbed his sword into the ground and used it to help him up. Yukakin! And Mitsuki jumped next to Yukakin as Konan appeared in a flurry of paper. Are you okay? Yukakin smiled at her, but couldn't stop the pain from entering her eyes. Yes. Yukakin grunted as he stood up. I've never felt better. With that, Madara reappeared in front of the three, his head tilted to the side. Now, what are you going to do? Madara smiled as the three looked at each other with slightly nervous expressions. I can answer that question for you. Madara disappeared once more in a burst of speed, reappearing behind Enmitsuki. Die! Enmitsuki turned around with a surprised expression just as Madara brought his fist down. But before Madara could connect with Enmitsuki, a sword extended out, blocking Madara's fist. Your fight is with me. Yukakin growled as he pulled Madara away from Enmitsuki. Konan, get yourself and Enmitsuki out of here and tell Naruto what happened. Konan glared at Yukakin, but that was when Enmitsuki walked over and stood beside her. I'm not leaving. Yukakin looked at Enmitsuki, who just stared at him with blood-red eyes. I can handle myself. Yukakin smiled at that and turned to Madara as Konan approached as well. Together we can stop him, Konan announced with certainty in her voice. Madara chuckled and shook his head from side to side. You know nothing about what I've become. Madara removed his mask, revealing a face that was cut in two. One half appeared to belong to a normal man with withered skin, but the other half was completely black, with only the Rinnegan glowing. You dash! Konan looked at Madara in shock as she smiled at him. Yes, I got back what was mine, Madara commented. But before Konan could speak further, Madara was suddenly attacked by a wave of ice that froze him in place. The group turned to see Haku standing with a look on his face as he turned to face his allies. The others are safe and sound, was his reply as he disappeared and reappeared next to Enmitsuki. I came back to help. Yukakin nodded, but that was when the ice broke, causing everyone to turn their attention back to Madara. How touching, Madara said as he dusted himself off with a smile. But I'm afraid none of you can even lay a single scratch on me. Madara then disappeared as Haku caused a giant wall of ice to appear around the group. And this proves it. Haku turned around just as Madara pierced him through the chest. The last of the group looked at the scene in shock as Madara threw Haku's body to Yukakin, who caught it but was sent backward by the throw. Haku! Yukakin shouted as he leaned towards Haku, who smiled at him with blood dripping from his mouth. It's okay, Yukakin, Haku managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. At least I can see Zabuza again. With that, Haku's head fell back, the ice shattering around her. Yukakin began to shake uncontrollably as she gently laid Haku's body down. How sad! Yukakin raised his head as his sword shattered, covering his body until he resembled nothing more than a sword turned human. Madara's eyes narrowed as Yukakin let out a roar as the swords were fired from his body. Madara avoided the swords in a burst of speed, reappearing behind Yukakin, but just before he could strike, the swords shot out from his back. Madara disappeared once more as the blades embedded themselves into buildings. Konan grabs Enmitsuki and runs. Yukakin growled as he punched the ground, causing more swords to erupt from the ground. No, we can dash dot. Enmitsuki never finished as Yukakin quickly disappeared and reappeared behind her. You can't do that, Yukakin said with a sad tone in her voice. Enmitsuki suddenly felt darkness close in around her as Yukakin struck the back of her neck. Yukakin wrapped her arms around Enmitsuki before she fell and gently handed her to Konan. Get her out of here. Conan looked Yukakin in the eyes and nodded before disappearing in a flurry of paper. You're going to die here, Madara replied with a sickly smile. Perhaps, but I'll make sure you remember that you fought me. Yukakin snarled as the two ran at each other with nothing but madness reflected in each other's eyes. X, Naruto, Tensa, Hinata, and Gaara continued through the trees and headed straight for Uchiha. Naruto stopped on a tree branch when he saw another figure approaching them carrying what looked like a body. Who's there? Naruto growled, not in the mood for another distraction. Naruto! Conan yelled as he appeared with a panicked expression on her face. Madara is in Uchiha. Naruto's eyes widened at that as Conan continued. He also took the Rinnegan from Nagato's body and killed Haku. Where is Yukakin? Naruto questioned with barely suppressed rage upon learning of Haku's death. He's trying to restrain Madara. As soon as those words left his lips, Naruto disappeared in a burst of speed, breaking the branch he was on. Naruto, wait! The entire group shouted as Naruto disappeared from their sight. Damn Yukakin! Naruto thought in despair. Why do you always try to do things yourself? X. The moment Naruto set foot in Uchiha, he knew what he would find. Everything was destroyed from the buildings to the ground. Naruto looked around and saw several swords sticking out everywhere. What happened? Naruto thought as he continued to search for Yukakin and Madara. It was then that he saw a massive black chakra pillar erupt from the center of the island. Naruto ran towards the energy, but couldn't shake the sinking feeling in his stomach. Naruto arrived on the scene to find one of the most disturbing sights he had ever seen. Madara was covered in a black chakra cloak holding 10 tails, and his skin began to peel on half of his body. Yukakin struggled to get up and grabbed the spot where his right arm used to be. Oh, look if it isn't Naruto! Madara declared in a resonant voice. Run, Naruto! Yukakin shouted, panic in his voice. He's also Dash. Yukakin's next words were cut off when Madara grabbed him by the neck and lifted him into the air. Now don't mess up the dash. Madara then received a kick to the side of the head, sending him tumbling into the rubble of a building. Naruto landed on the ground next to a gagging Yukakin, but grabbed his Kyuubi-covered foot as pain shot through him. Naruto looked down at his foot to see his cloak was completely burned away. What the hell did that do? Naruto looked up only to see Madara brushing dirt and debris off his shoulder. Naruto watched in horror as Madara grabbed a piece of the building and watched it dissolve into nothingness. What the hell are you? Naruto muttered with a nervous look in his eyes. I am Madara Uchiha. Madara replied with a smile on his face. Futurime no Rikudo, second of the 6 paths, and the Jinchuriki to Jubi. That last phase struck Naruto with a mix of fear and anger. Oh, that's right, you didn't know Bijou used to be an entity until Rikudo Sennin sealed it within himself. Then, just before he died, he used the last of his power and split the Great Beast's chakra into 9 separate entities. If that's true, how can you have it now? Naruto asked as Yukakin struggled to regain his balance. I still have Kyuubi-. You have part of the Kyuubi. Madara's voice turned colder with that, a lot of edge behind it. Your father, Minato, sealed half of the Kyuubi's chakra in you, while the other half was sealed in his body. The world seemed to stop as realization hit Naruto. That's right, I stole your father's body and extracted the other half of the Kyuubi's chakra. Right now, the Kyuubi isn't even at full power, but I'm still stronger than you and the Kyuubi combined. Face it, Uzumaki. You lost this fight the moment you stepped foot back on this sorry island. Naruto stopped if he kept the Kyuubi cloak active. Guess I don't have much of a choice. This made Madara tilt his head in confusion at Naruto's words. Naruto rose from the ground, disappearing and creating a crater in the ground as he reappeared behind Madara. But to turn you into dust. Madara simply glared at Naruto with his Rinnegan. He saw Naruto's arm come down towards his head, but before he could reach it, Madara grabbed Naruto's arm in a grab. The area Madara was in shook from the force of Naruto's punch, stopping so abruptly. I told you I'm stronger. Madara threw Naruto to the ground, and just as Naruto began to get up, he stomped him into the ground. Naruto screamed in pain as the Jubi cloak burned its way through the Kyuubi cloak and straight into his back. Just give up, Naruto. I don't want to waste my time on a weak dash. Madara stopped as a sword ripped from the ground and struck him in the chest. Madara looked down and watched the simple blade melt before looking up to see Yukakin staring back at him. Madara roared with laughter at Yukakin's challenge. You still think you can beat me? Why don't you come here and find out, scum? Yukakin shouted with hatred in his voice, causing Madara to glare at him. Find out I was gonna let you watch me kill that girl you liked here. Madara suddenly appeared next to Yukakin, his fist raised. But I changed my mind. Yukakin stood his ground as Madara's fist erupted from his back, splattering the rock behind him with blood. Now that's done. Madara stopped when he heard Yukakin laughing at him. What's so funny? This. Yukakin took the remaining strength left in his broken body and formed a tiger seal. Nizen Sekai, 10,000 worlds. Madara looked around and watched as all the swords Yukakin fired from his body began to break apart and form new swords until they began to darken from the sheer number of them. I'm going to die either way, but at least I can make sure Naruto has a chance. Yukakin smiled at Naruto as blood flowed from his lips. Goodbye. Yukakin slumped down onto Madara's arm just as the swords descended upon Madara. Naruto raised his arm to defend his face as the ground exploded from the impact of Yukakin's final attack. Naruto uncovered his eyes and found a sad sight, Yukakin's mangled body. Yukakin, Naruto muttered, but then reality hit Naruto in the face. Where's Madara? Naruto turned around just as Madara punched him in the stomach, sending him flying through several fallen buildings. That was foolish. Madara snarled, anger and hatred in his eyes. I'm giving you the chance to defeat me. You should know how useless that is against the new Madara Uchiha. I can't be stopped and I can't be killed. You can't win against me, Naruto. Naruto brushed some debris off his chest and gently lowered his head as the Kyuubi cloak faded away. I'm at my limit. Naruto thought with a certain amount of sadness in his thoughts. I can barely move my arms. Get up. Kyuubi roared in anger and spite at his container. You can still beat him, but you need to get up. I don't know what. Naruto began only for Kyuubi to roar in hatred. You're an Uzumaki, Kyuubi declared, each word falling like poison. You're the only clan that contains all of my power. Madara may have stolen the other half, but it still calls to join me. That half of my power is what holds the other bijou together. If you can get close enough, I can use my chakra to draw out my other half. But I don't have time. It was then that she noticed Naruto lift up his shirt and saw the seal containing Kyuubi glowing. I can use this seal as a medium and the rest of my chakra has a focal point. Kyuubi growled in response as Naruto stood up, surprising Madara. But I have to ask why you're helping me? Because no matter how much I hate the Uzumaki, Kyuubi growled with pure threat in his voice. I despise Madara even more. Naruto nodded, standing his ground as Madara began to laugh. Fool! You can't even hope to get close enough to beat me. Madara disappeared and grabbed Naruto by the neck in the span of a second. Do you understand the difference in our powers? Madara lifted Naruto into the air with a snarl on his face. Naruto suddenly reached up and grabbed Madara's arm, ignoring the burns he was receiving. Got you, was Naruto's only response as his top layer of clothing was ripped away by a massive release of chakra. Madara watched with fear in his eyes as Naruto's seal began to expand until it covered his entire body. What are you doing? Madara screamed as he tried to free his arm. But that was when a giant clawed hand erupted from Naruto's stomach and pierced through Madara's chest. Madara's body froze at the sudden intrusion as he stared at the red chakra as it slowly began to back away from Naruto. I'm taking back something that doesn't belong to you, Naruto muttered as his eyes slowly began to close as his chakra supply died down. Madara let out a roar as the other half of Kyuubi was ripped from his body, causing the other bijou to separate from Jubi's body. Naruto felt Madara's grip loosen until he fell to the ground with a thud. But in Naruto's mind something else was happening. XXX. Naruto woke up to find his sewer system gone only to be replaced by a large building in front of him. Naruto walked towards the building with caution in every step, but just as his foot touched the first step, The building exploded in a shower of tiles that filled every corner of Naruto's mind until he stood in what appeared to be a large dojo. The building was empty except for a pillow in the middle of the room, but it wasn't empty. An old man sat on the pillow with long gray hair that almost fell to the ground. "Please come closer." The man gestured for Naruto to come closer to him. Naruto moved closer, but with each step as cautious as the last. The man looked up and Naruto almost fell back in surprise. The old man looked almost identical to Naruto except for his eyes that possessed the Rinnegan. The man laughed at Naruto in amusement. "I am what your world calls the Rakudo Sannin." Naruto was surprised to hear these words, but he never let it show as he stared at the man in front of him. "You can't be him," Naruto said with certainty in his voice. "You died years and years ago." "I did die," Rakudo said in a solemn voice filled with years of wisdom. "But when I died, I finally placed a seal on the Kyuubi no Kitsune, one that will allow me to appear when my true descendant possesses it. I mean, Naruto, that I am your ancestor." "But how can that be?" Naruto said with surprise in his voice while the Rakudo smiled. "It's true, I only had 2 sons." The old man was startled as he looked up at the ceiling, perhaps lost in distant memories. "But here's the information lost to history that no one knew. My real name is Issei, Sage of the Second Order, Uzumaki." Issei smirked at Naruto's shocked face as he collapsed onto his butt and glared at him. "How else did I deal with Jubi? I may have created ninjutsu, but I used FUINJUTSU to seal him within me. But that was when the air in the room turned cold. Now you must do what I couldn't." "What is that?" Naruto asked, still confused by everything that was happening. "Get rid of Jubi for good," Issei shouted as she began to fade away. "I don't have much time, but you have the tool needed to finish the job, you just need to bring it out. Goodbye, Naruto Uzumaki. May we meet in the next life." And before Naruto could question further, Issei disappeared, taking the dojo and building with him. Naruto stood up as he looked at Kyuubi's cage, his red eyes glowing with malice. "Now what are you going to do?" Kyuubi growled at Naruto, who frowned at her. "You knew that, didn't you?" Naruto said as Kyuubi growled, which felt more like an earthquake. "So what if I did?" Kyuubi replied with no sympathy in her voice. "It wouldn't have done me any good if you knew that information." Naruto continued to glare at Kyuubi until she turned and headed left toward her forest. "Remember this, Naruto. I'm stronger than I was before I left here, and when I do, I'll kill you." Naruto ignored Kyuubi as he entered her forest and looked around until he saw the sword leaning against a tree. "I've transferred something of myself and a power to you." Itachi's words echoed as Naruto approached the tree. "Guess it's time to find out what that power is." Naruto gripped the sword and shield and felt a jolt of power course through him. Triple X. Madara watched in horror as Naruto slowly stood up, 9 distinct tails swishing behind him, yet he still maintained the sage-like appearance he had before absorbing the other half of Kyuubi. Madara watched as Naruto clenched his hand into a fist, and an ethereal blade appeared in his grip. "That can't be possible," Madara said, panic rising in his voice. "That's Itachi's Tatsuka no Tsurugi." Naruto raised the blade and looked at it in the light as a smile spread across his face. "I understand how to use it," Naruto replied with an air of power coming from him. This was Itachi's final gift to Konoha, the power to destroy Madara Uchiha. Naruto shouted this as the ground exploded, covering the area with debris as Naruto charged. Madara ducked under Naruto's sword swing and held his palm forward towards Naruto. "Shinra Tensei!" Madara yelled as he attempted to blast Naruto, but Naruto's 9 tails dug into the ground behind him and prevented him from moving. Madara's eyes widened in fear as Naruto smirked at him before roaring like a trapped animal, sending Madara's attack back at him. "That can't be possible." Madara was sent flying an inch above the ground as a shadow appeared above him. He looked up to see Naruto stomp him into the ground, causing a pillar of rubble to shoot upwards as the ground was pushed away from the impact zone. "You kept telling me to give up," Naruto growled as he bent his knees to get a closer look at Madara. "But I never give up, and I never give in." With that, Naruto jumped off Madara, pushing him further into the ground. "Don't let him look you in the eye." Kyuubi warned with a hint of hesitation in his voice. He can still stop the flow of my chakra. Naruto nodded as he vanished in a burst of speed before reappearing next to Madara's head. Madara looked at Naruto just as Naruto kicked his head, but just as Madara began to leave the ground, a wall of sand appeared in front of him, cushioning his impact. What the hell? Naruto thought in confusion as Madara started laughing. I still have the other 8 bijou inside me. Madara replied as he slid across the arena toward their fight. And they will still protect their host in the hopes of being free. Madara turned around as blood slowly began to drip from his eyes. Naruto gripped his sword tighter as he felt the different sources of chakra coming from Madara. Then I'll have to hit you. Naruto roared as he was surrounded by a pillar of energy that slowly began to burn the ground. Madara smirked as different colored chakra began to pour out of him. Naruto and Madara launched themselves at each other, colliding into a chakra pillar as the air around them began to distort from the pure chakra pouring out of these two. Naruto and Madara squinted at each other as they exploded away from each other only to disappear and clash once more. You may have Kyuubi, but I have the other bijou. Madara yelled as a giant wall of sand came from underneath Naruto and forced him flying. Naruto looked down just as Madara's hands seemed to burn with blue flames. He punched the sand and Naruto watched in awe as the fire began to climb up the sand as if it were alive, turning the sand into glass as it rose. This is bad, Naruto thought as he roared, releasing a wave of chakra that ripped the sand off him, allowing him to escape. Naruto landed on the ground next to Madara as he swung his sword at Madara only for him to jump into the air and hover there with a smirk. He can fly? It was then that he noticed the chakra wings on Madara's back. The host of the Nanabai no Kabutomushi gains the ability to make chakra wings. Madara said with a smile still on his face. I have the advantage that not only can you not touch me, but the moment you look into my eyes, I will not hesitate to force the return of the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto growled as he felt more of the Kyuubi's chakra force into his body. Face it, you can't beat me. Naruto growled with animal power in his voice as he climbed up a slanted building until he reached the top. Madara watched with wide eyes as Naruto leapt into the air using the sun to blind Madara as he brought the sword down towards Madara's face. But before it reached him, a wall of sand appeared in front of the sword. Naruto was suddenly knocked away from Madara by a wave of sand and chakra. What the hell am I supposed to do? Naruto growled furiously as he fell from the sky and landed on his feet. I'll win, Naruto shouted as the image of a giant fox appeared behind him. Madara smiled at Naruto, but his smile soon disappeared as a shadow fell over him. Die, Madara! Madara turned towards the voice as Naruto looked up to see a badly injured Sasuke with his sword above his head. Madara watched as the sword fell towards him, but simply let it pass through him. Sasuke hit the ground with a tremendous thud, but quickly got back to his feet, muttering curses under his breath. I'll deal with you once you're dead, Sasuke announced, turning his only active Sharingan on Naruto, who nodded. I wouldn't have it any other way, Naruto muttered as lightning began to bounce off Sasuke's body and he began to fade into the sky. Why are you fighting him? Madara asked with confusion and anger in his voice. You're an Uchiha Dashta. That's right. I'm an Uchiha, Sasuke muttered darkly, his hair keeping his eyes hidden. Which is a lot more than you can say. Madara was shocked by Sasuke's words as the Uchiha continued. You killed our clan out of spite. You didn't appreciate it when they betrayed you and went along with the Senju. But Itachi did what he did because he was ordered to. Sasuke raised his head, his eternal Mangekyo spinning like a top. I will not allow you to sully the Uchiha name. Suddenly, a giant flash of lightning appeared, causing both Madara and Naruto to look up. You remember this jutsu, right, Madara? Sasuke's smile was one of both joy and rage as Madara's eyes opened. I decided to change it up a bit. Behold, Enten, Kirin. The lightning-based dragon descended from the skies, but it wasn't just covering the beast. It was the flickering flames of Amaterasu. Once it connects, it won't explode like last time. Oh no, it'll scar the ground and reduce everything to dust. Sasuke lowered his arm to give Naruto enough time to grab Sasuke, and shoot out just as the dragon collided with Madara and the center of the island. Naruto reappeared with Sasuke on his shoulder and turned around to see Uzushiogakure engulfed by black fire. "Why did you save me?" Naruto quickly dropped the Uchiha to the ground. "I didn't do it," was Naruto's reply as he looked at his ethereal sword. "I just wanted to end our fight." Sasuke glared at Naruto as he turned to face Sasuke, but that was when a vortex appeared between them. They both stared in shock as Madara's badly burned body fell in front of them. "I won't die so easily," Madara commented as he stood up with his left arm hanging limply at his side. "I'm immortal." Sasuke narrowed his eyes as his hand erupted into lightning. Naruto, on the other hand, looked at Madara with a look of pity and disgust. "Why can't you just accept it?" Naruto asked, getting Madara's attention. "You're in no position to fight us." Naruto began walking towards Madara as his chakra formed into a giant pillar with the faces of every bijou on it. "That won't help you." The chakra suddenly turned into a large chakra ball that slowly began to shrink. "I'll crush you, Uzumaki," Madara shouted as he threw the orb at Naruto, who stood his ground. The orb collided with Naruto and shot upwards in a beam of black energy as the ground began to crack from the force. Sasuke brought his entire arm up to block his face from the debris being sent his way as Madara began to laugh. "I will rule the world and produce eternal peace." Madara stopped as Naruto reappeared next to him, already swinging his ethereal blade at him. Madara felt the blade pass through him as blood shot out of his mouth, causing him to fall to his knees. "This is over, Madara," Naruto replied as the sword went to work sucking Madara in. Madara glared at Naruto, his Sharingan glowing with hatred. "Why are you struggling to stop me?" Madara questioned as he tried to fight the ceiling. "My peace is the only true peace." Naruto looked Madara straight in the eyes, not with hatred, but with understanding. "Because I'll make sure the entire world stops fighting." Naruto looked at his sword as he plunged it into Madara's chest. "But the first thing to do is get rid of the bijou. Goodbye, Madara Uchiha." Madara looked at Naruto as his entire body was sucked into the sword, leaving only Naruto and Sasuke. Naruto released the Kyuubi's chakra and watched as the sword vanished into the wind. "Now we finish what we started." Sasuke smiled as his lightning ball began to turn black. Naruto nodded as he formed a Raisin Shuriken in his palm, causing Sasuke's smile to grow wider. "I see you're not stopping. I don't want any more interruptions," was Naruto's reply as Sasuke laughed. "This is the end of the road, Sasuke. Now the question is who will be the last man standing." Sasuke snarled at Naruto as the two stood facing each other with the wind cascading across the field. The two rushed out of their perches and swung their jutsu at each other. Triple X and Mitsuki and the others jumped into a nearby clearing only to see a giant crater and also saw Uzushiogakure burning. What happened here? She and the others suddenly heard the clash of metal on metal. They all turned to see Naruto and Sasuke standing on the opposite side of each other. Sasuke's sword was sparking with his lightning chakra, while Naruto's staff was surrounded by wind chakra. Both of them were missing pieces of clothing and were injured from support. "We need to help." Hinata stopped when Naruto smiled at her. "I don't want anyone interrupting this fight," Naruto said as his staff began to crack and split. "Because this is what Sasuke and I have been waiting for." Naruto slammed his staff on the ground and everyone watched as his staff began to bend and twist. Sasuke smiled at Naruto as his staff finished its transformation into a katana-less guard. "So this is going to end without swords." Naruto didn't comment except raising his sword, pointing the blade at Sasuke. They stared at each other with no other thought on their minds except the fight ahead. Hinata watched with concern in her eyes as Naruto and Sasuke began to pace around each other without taking their eyes off each other. The wind began to blow across the battlefield, knocking a single leaf off a tree, allowing it to slowly fall to the ground. But the moment it touched the ground, Naruto and Sasuke charged. Naruto brought his sword down while Sasuke raised his, causing the two swords to meet at a single point. Naruto used his momentum from the sudden stop to flip over Sasuke and land right behind him. Sasuke spun his body around, roughly dodging a stab from Naruto, and delivered a slimy elbow to Naruto's head. Naruto skidded across the ground as Sasuke charged once more with a sickening thrill in his eyes. Naruto dug his feet into the ground and spun in a circle with his sword at his side. Sasuke dodged just as the sword flew past him, but was unable to dodge Naruto's kick that was aimed for his stomach. Sasuke grabbed Naruto's outstretched leg and pulled him back as he was sent flying back. Naruto spun his sword until it pointed at the ground before driving it into the dirt and rock. Sasuke smirked as he brought his sword up and brought it down in a stab aimed straight for Naruto's chest. Naruto swung his left arm up just in time for it to take the impact and also allowed Naruto to pull the sword away. Naruto pulled his sword out of the ground and threw it at Sasuke, forcing him to let go of Naruto's leg and grab the blade. Naruto took his opportunity and grabbed the blade on his forearm and pulled it out just as Sasuke looked up. Naruto swung the sword in an arc downwards towards Sasuke's head. But Sasuke jumped back only to receive a slash that fell across his eye. Naruto spun the blade while twisting his body, trying to gain momentum just as Sasuke began to do the same. They both swung their swords, causing a spark of metal to appear as they crossed. They both twisted their bodies at the same time as they thrust their swords forward. Sasuke and Naruto stood as still as statues, with everyone else watching in horror at the sight of them both impaled. But that was when Sasuke coughed up blood as he stumbled backwards with his sword still in his chest. Naruto stood up with his sword caught in his other hand, with blood dripping from the wound in his hand. Sasuke looked at the blade with a mix of shock and amusement. "To think I would die like this." Sasuke coughed as his knees began to shake. "Tell me, Naruto, do you hate me?" Naruto dropped his sword and looked at the one he thought of as a brother with tears falling from his eyes. "You tried to kill me on multiple occasions and you attacked Konoha." Naruto looked Sasuke straight in the eyes and saw the light beginning to fade in them. "But the strange thing is, Sasuke, I don't think I can ever truly hate you. You were like a brother to me, and that's the memory I'll always cherish. I'll keep the memory of what you used to be alive. But the Sasuke I see in front of me needed to die. Goodbye, Sasuke." Sasuke slowly closed his eyes as a smile began to form on his lips. "Idiot." With that, Sasuke collapsed beside him as his chest stopped moving. Everyone looked over at Naruto just in time to see him collapse as well. XXX. Naruto felt himself floating in a sea of darkness as his eyes slowly began to close. "Naruto." Naruto's eyes opened again at the voice as if he had only heard it in a dream. "You have to stay awake, Naruto." Naruto continued to look around, but all he could see was vast darkness. Naruto tilted his head again and felt himself beginning to fall into his eternal sleep. But at that moment, a strong fist descended and struck him in the head. Naruto jerked up and rubbed his head furiously and looked towards the direction the fist came from. "I finally woke you up, brat." Naruto's eyes widened at the voice as he began to remember. "You need to wake up, honey." Naruto turned towards the new voice as the darkness began to fade, revealing Kushina, Jiraiya, Minato, Ananami, Kakahiki, and Yukaken. "What are you doing here?" Naruto questioned as he looked at his hand in confusion. "I'm dead." This caused Minato to chuckle as he wrapped his arm around Naruto's shoulders. "I guess you can say you're in the middle," Minato said, a smile still on his face. "All I remember was swinging my sword at Sasuke and then..." Naruto gestured at the surrounding darkness. "Did I kill Sasuke?" Kakahiki yawned, causing everyone to look at him. "Yes, the Uchiha boy is dead." Kakahiki looked at Naruto with the same tired look he had when he was alive. Naruto gave Kakahiki a sad smile as he sighed. "Don't apologize now, Naruto. I made my bed, and now I can finally take a well-deserved nap." Naruto chuckled and looked at Yukaken, who slowly walked over to Naruto. "Naruto, tell Mitsuki I'm sorry." Yukaken looked at Naruto with deep regret in her eyes. "But I did what I did to try to make the world a much safer place for our son." Naruto nodded and shook Yukaken's outstretched hand. "I promise you, Yukaken." This brought a wide grin to Yukaken's face as Jiraiya pushed him away. "Now you can't just go off and be the same brat, you understand." Jiraiya replied sternly, but couldn't help but smile. "But either way, I'm proud of my student and godson." Jiraiya turned and walked away as Kushina and Minato gave Naruto a big hug. "You did it, Naruto," they both said with joy in their voices. "We couldn't be more proud of you than we are right now. But it's time for you to wake up. Your friends are waiting." "Wait, Are you saying this is all a dream? Naruto asked, looking from face to face, but the only answer came from his father. You could say that. Minato looked up as the darkness began to part, spilling sunlight into the area. But of course what a dream is. People talk about dreams and how they'll make them come true. But is it really true? I'll have to say yes to that, because dreams are what make you Naruto. Without dreams you are nothing but an empty shell looking for a place to belong. Now you asked if this was a dream, well that's for you to decide, Naruto. Naruto was about to open his mouth to speak when a beam of light struck him, rendering him blind from seeing and hearing. XXX. Naruto's eyes snapped open only to be blinded by a small flash of light forcing him to close his eyes. Naruto slowly opened his eyes once more to see that he was in a hospital room filled with all of his friends. Naruto continued to look around to see a crying Hinata in front of him. What's with dash? Naruto never finished the question as Hinata threw herself at him and wrapped him in a bear hug. Naruto looked down at Hinata's head as she cried, allowing Shikamaru to speak. You've been gone for almost 2 months, Naruto. Naruto turned his head in surprise as Shikamaru continued. The combined effect of fighting in 3 different battles and then sealing Madara put you in a coma. Naruto smiled at his good fortune to have gotten out as he gently began rubbing Hinata's back. I thought I was going to lose you as a father. Hinata managed to choke back tears. I'm not going anywhere, Hinata. Naruto continued rubbing Hinata's back as her tears slowly began to die. I promised Hayashi I would keep you safe and I won't break that vow. The others began to leave, deciding to leave them alone. Hinata, can you help me? Hinata looked at Naruto as he looked out the window with a slight smile. I want to watch the sunrise with my girlfriend. Hinata looked around a bit and as gently as she could picked Naruto up and helped him up to the window. They both watched as the golden orb began to rise in the distance, while Naruto grabbed his necklace that he won against Tsunade. What are you doing? Hinata asked as she felt the necklace wrapped around her neck. I won this from Tsunade when I went looking for her. Naruto explained as he gently took Hinata's hand in his own. I want you to have it because I always wanted to give it to you, but what, Naruto? Hinata asked as Naruto looked into her eyes with pure happiness. But only when I could work up the courage to tell you. Naruto continued to look into Hinata's eyes as he watched her tremble slightly. So I guess here goes. Hinata Hyuga, ever since we started dating, I've never been happier. In my entire life, I never knew what it was like to be completely loved by someone. But that changed that day. By this point, Naruto had a few tears in his eyes as he looked up at the sun. So I guess I'm asking. Naruto was silenced when Hinata turned her head towards her and kissed him fully on the lips. You don't need to ask, was Hinata's only response before the two of them kissed once more. They broke apart only after needing to take a breath, but they were both still smiling. So what happens now, Naruto? Naruto wrapped his arm around Hinata's waist and looked up at the sun. I don't know what the future will hold. Hinata rested her head on Naruto's shoulder as she sighed in contempt. But as long as we're together, there's nothing we can't handle. The two remained completely still, like statues, as if the world around them didn't exist except for them. XXX. Naruto Uzumaki sat atop his tower, staring up at the moon, a dull expression on his face. It's been 5 years since that battle. Naruto thought in disbelief at her words. At least the fighting has stopped for a while, Naruto said as a figure walked behind him, wrapping his arms around his waist and resting his head on his back. You should be asleep. You should be too. Hinata replied as Naruto turned to look directly at her. You have to attend the Kage meeting tomorrow and you need your rest. After the destruction of Uchiha, Naruto dedicated himself to rebuilding his home, with help from Konoha and Kumo. To everyone's surprise, it was rebuilt. Emitsuki was devastated by Yukaken's death at first, but after Naruto spoke his final words, her resolve returned. She now lived in Uchiha looking after her son, whom she had named Yukaken after his father. Naruto then made it his mission to make sure the world stopped its constant fighting and proposed that a meeting of all the Kage be held once a year to promote stability between the villages. So far it was working and everyone was getting along much better. but there was still some tension about becoming friendly. Naruto smiled at Hinata as he gave her a soft kiss and continued to look into her eyes. "How are you?" Naruto asked as Hinata blushed a little and looked down while rubbing her stomach. "We're fine," Hinata replied as Naruto gave her another kiss. "Come on. I need to get some sleep." Naruto looked back at the moon as he was gently led toward the door. "Is this the peace you wanted, Jiraiya, Dad? If so, I plan to keep it on this path and make sure it stays that way, I promise." Naruto looked away from the moon with a smile as he closed the door to the past and opened the door to the future.